It says I don't get my nuke till next month. Do I give it the sugar water still, or even though there are plants in full bloom? If you have a nuke and you have all foundation, yes, feed it, because they won't take it if they don't need it. If it's naturally coming in the front door, that's great, and they'll pull out tons of foundation that or tons of wax and get into drawn comb. But if there's ever days, just like we've had in Northwest Ohio, we've had 4 cold days, wet, whole nasties, where the bees aren't out. That sugar water on top would help draw that out. Anybody else got a thought on that?
I was gonna reconfirm, if you're trying to get foundation drawn out, you should really feed them. Getting your bees that late in June. I don't know what your honey flow is or how long it lasts, but you're like starting in the second half of the season almost, and they got a lot of work to do. Oh, you're full of wax. Drawn wax, Brad, or foundation wax? But either way,
Oh, he's talking, Roger. He says do it for about a month or so till the first box is full and starting on the second. To get that colony ready for wintertime, if you're not going to get your bees till next month, I would feed all the way. Don't expect any honey out of it. If you want to get them through wintertime and get them bulked up.
Yep. And again, they won't take it when they don't need it. Your job as a first year is to get both brood boxes full of new honey, new
drawn comb and honey.
drawn frames. I'm sorry, I'm off. My mouth's not connected yet.
Another cup of coffee.
I'm working on it.
And Sherry, can't wait to check on my new queen. I like giving new queens at least 10 days or so after release before I even want to look at them. I sold somebody a queen 2 weeks ago, and she checked on it within a week, and she pulled the frame out, and I got a report of the queen running right off the frame and onto the grass. So she had nervously picked the queen back up and put it back in the hive, but they're skittish sometimes. Well, it's 9:02. We'll get ready and get going here. Welcome everyone to the May edition of the beginner internship class for OSBA. We welcome you. We welcome all questions. We had a little chit chat here to start with. Feel free to join in. I got the agenda up on the screen. We might not start with Jeannie right away since she's having it, if we can work out some of her issues. But if nothing else, we can listen to her.
Well, and you've got the video, right?
Yep. Yes.
So that's no big deal. Yeah.
So if anybody has anything or review of last month, Lorene's here. We had a lot of positive feedbacks on her talking about the sting and what happens when you do get stung. Sooner or later, if you're a beekeeper, sooner or later you get stung. It might be on the first day. It might be the first day of the second year. Who knows? But you should be prepared for that. The flowers are blooming up here in Northwest Ohio. We're in the middle of the dandelion season. We finally are going to have a week of good weather. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting since probably last September for a week of good weather. It is windy today, but they tell me the wind's going to slow down. I've been working I think I've worked bees more this year in 55 to 60 degree and windy weather than my whole career put together. Some days you got to get things done. The bees aren't holding back. I've caught 2 swarms of my own, and my prediction back in March was the week of May 8th was going to be the booming swarm week, and I think I'm going to hit the nail on the head. First time in my life, without hitting my finger first. But I see we're getting lots of reports of queen cells and stuff. So even a first year beekeeper, once your neighbors find out you're a beekeeper and they see a swarm, they'll be calling you. So
Mhm.
you might want to have some, even a cardboard box will do to catch them. What's everybody else seeing around the state? Lorraine, you want to unmute yourself? Tell me what's going on over your way.
First swarm call I received was 2 days ago when we had a brief or maybe 3 days ago when we had a brief 2-3 hours of warmth and then took off.
Yep.
I think come Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all
Mhm.
excuse the word, HE double hockey stick is going to break loose with swarms.
Yep.
I'm seeing in my hives, the ones I can get in, my massive overwintered, that I have got queen cups, massively, numbers of them. And I also have filled queen cells, swarm cells ready to go.
Mhm.
So I've already tried to do splits with those because I'm going to have a real issue.
Yep.
Now, did you get up north? Did you get all the rain the other day? Because we've got flooding everywhere.
Oh, it's flooded. My field is basically a mud pit.
Yep.
We lucked out on this week's rain. We only got like 3/10 yesterday. We had rain earlier in the week. It's rained like 3 times, but we're not flooded. But
Oh, man.
we are
We-
really wet. So
We have more water in the field across the street from us than we have ever had in the 40 years we've been here.
yeah.
So,
What do you have blooming down there, Jeannie?
oh my gosh, everything and
Everything?
anything, fruit
Oh.
trees, red buds, dogwoods, magnolias, and of course the maples have come and gone. They're in full leaf. Just crazy.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the same thing here, but because of the weather, what I'm seeing in my hives, because they're not getting out to forage,
Yep.
because of the rain, is I'm seeing protein deficiency just with the amount of royal jelly in the cells. So I think between the rain and the artificially cramped condition, it's perfect for that congestion for swarming and set up for swarming. But I'm also seeing protein deficiency.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
because of the pollen not getting in.
Well, and also honey, I think this is the lowest honey supplies I've seen overall through all my hives ever. So what we're saying is, every year's a little different. They've used every bit of honey that they had stored through the winter, most of these hives, to raise brood. Usually by now we'd have a good honey flow going on where they fill the hive as fast as the queen can lay eggs and hatch, and it's a mess. Where this year they work for, like Lorraine said, about 2 hours, and then they take 4 days off. And by the time that 4 days comes up, the honey's gone. So that's why we encourage new people to really feed. I have a swarm, if we have, or a package that I installed in the middle of April, that if we have time, we'll watch that video. They're taking the sugar syrup, converting it to wax, and filling it up. It looks, for a package, it looks beautiful. So everybody's just a little different. I saw that Carol's here. Carol's close to Lorraine. Anybody down southern Ohio past Columbus? Jeannie's in Columbus. That sounds about like us. I think every flowering tree is blooming. The forsythia are just finally ending up here. Redbuds are in full bloom. The flowering cherries are kind of over. We're right in the middle of dandelion season. So
Yep.
the bees have a smorgasbord right now going on.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
So I don't hear anybody else talking about what they're seeing. We're gonna move on then. Since we're talking about heat and different years. Well, first off, I was gonna talk, I hope everybody knows about the Ohio Beginner Internship. Here's another opportunity to always, use that to ask questions. The senior beekeepers here, we're glad to answer those questions for you online in between meetings. It is a closed group, so it's only us on there. And ask a question, usually within a couple hours, you get a reply on that. So
Hey, Roger, you got a couple things in the chat that people have
okay,
responded.
I just clicked the chat off so I could see everything else. All right.
Lots of wild plum and apple down south from Kelly.
Okay, from Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. Yep. And autumn olive is in full. Oh,
Yep.
yep. You're definitely ahead of us. Our apple trees will be blooming this week. They've got color,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as autumn olive and the honeysuckle, we're still a couple weeks out.
And somebody has a question there. Do you give?
Yes, I would give both sugar water and protein right now. I give little pieces of protein patties to my packages and new nukes, and I would also feed sugar water if I were you. Yep.
Yeah, don't put a whole protein patty on.
Yeah, I feed bits and pieces. I take that patty and rip it. I use just little pieces, especially the smaller the hive, the smaller the pieces. And
yeah, because otherwise you'll get hive beetles.
Hive beetles can eat it, and if they're not eating it, it'll dry out. And once it dries out, they refuse to eat it too because it becomes very hard. So then you just throw it away.
Yep.
And Brad said my apples and plums in Northeast Ohio. So yep. I don't think there's a big difference between the north and the south part of the state this year. Just everything's been kind of holding, not much difference. The weather's been really crummy. One thing beekeepers do have in common, we always complain about the weather. So,
but the trees and flowers like it. We're as you're going to see in this growing degree days is from last year. This year we're way ahead, like 300 days. I looked it up just a minute ago. And so, this rain and such, even the cooler weather is great for the trees and flowers. The bees just can't get to it.
Right. And what happens with cool weather, let's say the forsythia bloom between 100 growing degree days and 150. Well, we hit 100 3 weeks ago, but we still haven't hit the 150. So they're still blooming up north here. They're just finishing up. So when we have a long, cool spring, the flowers last a lot longer. And you probably noticed that in your own gardens where the tulips and daffodils last so much longer. But when you have, let's say like this coming week where it's going to be 80, 85, almost 90, we'll burn through a lot of days, and like the tulips will look good one day and they'll be shot the next just because they've outgrown their heat cycle. So but that's part of Mother Nature's work, and we'll learn about that. Also, everybody's a member of the Ohio State Beekeepers Association. Feel free, that the website's there for you to use. So please use it. And back to the agenda. And with that, I don't know if anybody's had any more questions. I only can run so many screens at once here. So with that, Jeannie's here. We're going to start with Jeannie's growing degree days. Hopefully everybody watched Denise Ellsworth give the overview last month. We put it on the video for the YouTube channel because we ran out of time. We're really going to try to hold not past 12 o'clock. So if we have extra videos, we'll just put them on the YouTube channel and you can watch them there. So with that, we're gonna turn this over to Jeannie's talk from last year.
Hi, everybody.
Is it working
I'm
this
Jeannie
time?
Somm, and I am the president of the Fairfield County Beekeepers down in Lancaster, which is southeast of Columbus, and I live just outside the outer belt on the southeast edge of Columbus. Today, I'm going to share with you a very helpful program on the internet. This is about a program that's called Growing Degree Days and how this is going to help you be a better beekeeper. Growing degree days are a measurement of the growth and the development of plants and insects during the growing season. And the minimum base temperature for their growth and development is 50 degrees. Below that, the plants and animals will not start their spring development or late winter development. The growing degree days are calculated in a few different ways, and of course some are more accurate than others. A very simple way to figure out the growing degree days for a particular date is to take the average daily temperature, that's called the mean, and compare it to the base temperature, which is that 50 degrees that is the limit for things starting to grow. Now, if that average daily temperature in your particular area on a particular day is higher than 50 degrees, you take that average temperature, mean temperature, subtract the base temperature of 50 degrees, and whatever you get is the number of growing degree days, GDD, that have accumulated. So if the average temperature in your area on a particular day is 63 degrees, and you minus 50 from that, then you get 16 more growing degree days added to what the development of plants and animals should be on that particular day. Now, if your temperature is lower than the base, you would have 0 added. Now, there's another way of figuring this out, and that's when you limit the lowest temperature you would have or the highest temperature you would have to 50 or 86 degrees. And then there's another way of calculating, which of course is the most accurate, and this is a very scientific calculation using sine waves, which I'm sure is how they have created this program for us. So this is what it looks like. If you go to this blue website up here, www.oardc.ohio-state.edu/GDD for growing degree days, and you come to this calendar called the Ohio State Phenology Calendar. And what you do with this is you put your zip code in right here. They show it down here as well, but it works the same no matter what you do. So you're going to put your zip code in here, and for this particular date, it's going to show you the growing degree days and what plants and insects have developed thus far, and what actual event has happened, whether it's emerging or laying of eggs or blooming, full bloom, beginning bloom, things like that. One of the things you can do is click on the pictures that come up. And if you look at the picture up here in this right corner is the growing degree days when this particular event happens. Then you have the name of the item, whether it's a flowering shrub or tree or an insect. This happens to be a European fruit scale, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that word with the L. And then it shows you a picture of what is happening and then tells you what the event is. Is it the insect emerging? Is it the egg being laid or the egg being hatched? Now, the one thing I do want to alert you to is that this particular program only shows trees, shrubs, and insects. It does not show plants like perennials and wildflowers and things like that. And I'll have another resource for you at the end that will help you with knowing those things. So if you put your zip code into this box up here, and I've put in a zip code for Central Columbus, for the date of April 25th, which was about a week ago, you'll see that if you look in the middle here, the growing degree days for April 25th, 2021 in Columbus is 275 growing degree days. And then if you look to the left of this, you'll notice that these numbers up here in the corner are less than 275. So these events should have already started happening. The first bloom of the Japanese Caria, the first bloom of the black viburnum. And if you have any of those in your yard, those should be blooming at this point. Also, this willow beetle is going to be emerging. Now, if you look to the right of Columbus, you'll see that sometimes these numbers are the same as the 275 down here, but these are not. So evidently on this particular day of 275, there isn't anything first happening. But in just a few days, about 6 days, the red chokeberry should be in first bloom. And in, 15 more days, the wayfaring tree viburnum will be in full bloom, and the sergeant crabapple will come several days after that, and that will be in full bloom. Now, another thing you can do once you get to this screen, you can either click on any of these individual things and see a bigger picture. But you can also click on the full calendar up here, and this is what you'll get. So this shows you right in the middle, Columbus, April 25th, we're at 275. If you want to see what's happened prior to that, you can scroll up, and you can scroll all the way back to the beginning of the growing season. You can also look and see what's coming up, and this is very helpful in predicting things that are going to be happening for our bees. And these are the things that will be happening later. So you can scroll down. So if I scroll up all the way to the beginning, you can see that in any area in Ohio, these are the things that are going to be blooming, coming out, hatching, and so forth on these particular growing degree days. Those are over here on the right. So it's interesting to look at, we always say that the maple trees are the first things that come out that are food for the bees. And look what we have here. We have silver maple. We have another silver maple. We have red maple. We have a dogwood, an alder, forsythia, Japanese pyrrhus, another maple down here, the star magnolias. So these are all things that are those first blooms that are helping our bees. But your area has to be at growing degree day 34 to up here to 75 or so for those things to be blooming. And we're going to find today that that's very different in each region in Ohio. If we scrolled all the way down from that Columbus growing degree day of 275, way down here at the end on day 1347, you can see Rose of Sharon and Golden Rain Tree are the last things in the growing season to bloom. Now here's a map of Ohio, and there's a lot to look at here, so I'm going to walk through this, but this is very interesting, and this is something that we need to remember when we all get together in this particular training, because we're from all over Ohio, and even though we feel like we're kind of all the same in our plants and animals and things like that, there's really quite a bit of difference. So this is the growing degree days for Ohio regions on April 25th, which was a week ago or so. And we're going to start up here at the top. And this number 217 was the growing degree day for Ashtabula on the same day that I did that one for Columbus down here at 275. And look at the amount of difference. And then we go over here to Toledo, and that's 221. Cleveland is quite a bit ahead of those two cities at 283. So things are blooming in Cleveland that aren't blooming in Ashtabula or Toledo. Defiance is about the same. We dropped down here to Marion, 241, but that's further ahead than Mansfield and Youngstown, which are similar in their latitude. Then we had done Columbus, so that's at 275. And look down here, interestingly, right now in Dayton, they would be a little behind, as would Steubenville over here on the right, on the east. Then we go down to these cities down in southern Ohio. Cincinnati, 277, about the same as Columbus. But look at Chillicothe, Athens, Portsmouth, they're in the 280s. And then Marietta's a little behind from Athens. So if you look over here on the right, the lowest growing degree day was up in Ashtabula. And I'm going to get rid of my picture here and go back. And 217, so from northern Ohio at 217 down to central Ohio, Mansfield-ish area, Youngstown, we're at 233, 16 days further ahead. This is an incredible jump from middle Ohio to Columbus, which is still considered central Ohio, 42 days difference than way up here in Ashtabula. And then another 12 days between southern Ohio. So between northern Ohio and southern Ohio, there are 60 days difference in the growing degree days. However, one of the things I'm going to show you a little later is that it's going to be different on different days of the growing season. We might not always be 60 days apart. On this particular day in April, we were, because of the weather patterns that were coming through Ohio. And, typically we think of Route 70 as being kind of the dividing line. And if you live above Route 70, you might get the snowstorms. And if you live below Route 70, you get rain. Different times of the growing season, these differences vary. On February 24th, the growing degree days in Ashtabula was 1, the lowest one you can have. But the growing degree day 1 in Portsmouth was February 17th. So you can see there's only 7 days difference. Portsmouth at this point in time in February was only 7 days ahead of Ashtabula. So not always that big jump from region to region. But of course, you know, different times of the season and from year to year, this will be different depending on the prevailing weather and things like that that are happening in different regions of Ohio. So just to take a look at what you might find in your areas. Here's a zip code from Northern Ohio, and this is the Ashtabula one, I think. And this is what's happening April 25th. They're at 217, and they're having the bloom of flowering quince. The Carolina silver bells are just coming out in a few days. And actually, this is the same day, 217. The coral burst crab apple will be in first bloom. This elf leaf miner is emerging, and the serviceberry is in full bloom. Those things have probably already happened in central Ohio. Now, if we click on the full calendar, you can see the things that have already happened in Ashtabula: crabapple, viburnum leaf beetle, crabgrass, Carolina silver bells, and some of the insects. And then coming up for that area, we saw the crabapple and the serviceberry, but coming up in several days, they're going to have a chokeberry in full bloom, some insects coming out, and the wayfaring tree viburnum is coming up at 229. And that was on the Columbus one, but that's already happened in Columbus at 275. Here's a central Ohio. Again, the Columbus, we took a look at this a little earlier. The Caria, the black hall viburnum, the chokeberry, the wayfaring, and the sergeant crabapple. And then things that have already happened, things that will be happening in the near future. This is showing us the black hall viburnum. If I clicked on one of those pictures on the kind of the summary page, you can see a little bit bigger picture of what is going to happen, the details and the bigger photo. Here's one from a southern area. This is for Portsmouth. Portsmouth is in day 287, so they're a couple weeks ahead of Columbus. That black hall viburnum happened already. The red chokeberry happened already, and coming up there is the wayfaring viburnum, the sergeant crabapple, and the Persian lilac, and those are going to bloom about 2 weeks earlier down here in Portsmouth than they did, and they were predicted to do that in Columbus. And then again, we can click on full calendar, and we get the things coming up. So they're looking at the red horse chestnut, the umbrella magnolia, several insects that are going to be coming out, the spirea down here at the bottom. So again, you can predict what's going to be happening in your area. So how can we use this in our beekeeping? Well, first of all, you're going to know what's blooming right now. You know, is there anything out there for the bees this week to eat? Are there pollen sources on their nectar sources? Now, obviously, it doesn't tell us that on this website, so you're going to have another resource, which I'll show you later, that will tell you whether or not the magnolia tree is a resource for bees. We know that maples are, and so we would have to look up some of them if we didn't know for sure. The other thing it can help you do is predict a honey flow or a dearth by looking ahead and letting you know when feed might be needed. If there's nothing blooming at that time, nothing coming out that's really a source for the bees, then you're going to know you'll have to maybe feed your bees, pollen supplements or sugar water. This is, again, the website for the growing degree days, or the phenology, which is the plants and animals development during a season. If you need to write that down again, you can do that. You can actually leave off the calendar view, and that the first part of the website will be fine. And this is what's happening in my area. Now, if you want to know the other food sources for the bees, you may want to take a look at this resource. This one is the pollen and nectar producing plants, the major and minor sources. This was put together, it's my understanding, by Jim Tu when he was at Ohio State University working in the honey lab. And so this is the Ohio pollen and nectar sources for the honeybees. If you don't want to copy this whole long website down, just Google Ohio pollen and nectar sources for honeybees, and this will come up. And again, this was put out by the entomology department and the honeybee lab at Ohio State University. If you take a look at this page, what this is going to show you up here at the top, P is for pollen, N is for nectar, SA would be a an abbreviation for specific plants, but on this particular document, they spell out the plants. And then WSUW would be the flower garden at Worcester, and major would tell you that it's a major source of either pollen or nectar. So if we start down this list and we look at the first entry here, alder, the alder tree, it's a pollen source. It blooms February to April. Now here's where you might be able to use your growing degree days and go back to that and find out when in your region it will bloom. Because this isn't going to tell you whether you're Northern Ohio, Central Ohio, or Southern Ohio. It could be anywhere from February to April. The alfalfa, it says it's a good honey plant. It's a source for nectar and pollen, and it blooms between July and August. Now that will not be on the growing degree days because that's a crop rather than a blooming tree or shrub. Alsike clover, nectar and pollen, it's a major honey plant. Anywhere from May to July is its bloom time. And again, this will not be on the growing degree days because it's not a flowering tree or shrub. So this might be something you're going to have to look for in your yard, in fields, and so forth. Here we have alyssum, we have American mountain ash, we have hyssop, we have apple. And again, you can see apple is a major source for nectar and pollen, and it blooms between April and May, depending on where you are. This is in alphabetical order, and it goes on and on and on. It's about 5 or 6 or 7 pages long, and you can download it, print it off, and keep it as a resource. So now I'm going to turn this back over to the main program, and you can ask questions if you have any, and we'd be happy to answer those. One of the things I want to say is on these things, it's real easy to find them. I can put in OSU-GDD, and that's the first thing that comes up to find the growing degree days. So, you don't have to have the whole big long link. The one thing that I will say about the list of all the plants at the end, we have asked OSU and the extension agent if they would work on that. It's a shame that it's not in a spreadsheet because it's not sortable. It's in alphabetical order. So it's it would be nice to be able to sort it by the dates and things like that. It would be great if it had pictures with it, because a lot of times we don't know what some of these things look like. But I find that particular source more useful actually than the GDD because it has everything. It doesn't just have plants and trees. And Dottie, I'll look your region up here. Hang on.
And while Jeannie was talking, up here I'm in Swanton, close to Toledo, we're at 227 growing degree days currently as of this morning or yesterday. So it's not too far off of what last year was, but last year Jeannie did this in April, about 2 weeks ago. So we are behind from last year, but the nice thing about the growing degree days, you can go back years and years, just go back for research to see where we are. And it varies a lot between years. There is an average, but some years we're way behind and some years we're way ahead. So every year's a little different.
And it's really all about the temperature more than anything. And it's that temperature over time. I mean, the minute it starts being 50 degrees, that starts the growing degree day clock, sort of. But yeah, we're at Dottie's at 345 down by Lancaster. So there's quite a bit of difference.
Yep. So that's why there's a big difference when we're talking beekeeping in Ohio between what goes on in Cincinnati, like down with Kelly Morse down by the Ohio River, and what happens with Jamie and I up close to the Michigan border, or the guys over at Ashtabula up next to the lakes, even worse, the closer to the lake, because the lake temperature keeps everything cooler. I think the news this morning said the lake temperature is 53 degrees because we got an east wind blowing off Lake Erie today. So if you're up like downtown Toledo, it might be 50, where it'll get 65 out where I live. So
right. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things in beekeeping to learn is the plant cycles. It's hard to know. You've got to know your plants to know when a honey flow is on, when the pollen is you know, really out there for them. Of course, you can tell that by when they're flying in with it, but you've got to start paying attention to everything around you and not what's just in your yard. As you drive down the road, you know, see what's blooming, look at what's in the ditches and what's in the trees, and start knowing your plants.
Yep, and back to know if there's nectar coming in the hive, you need to open up the lid and take a look at your frames to see what's going on. You know, it's hard to tell what's going on. We can see the pollen come in, but we can't see the nectar come in. We can't see if they're storing it or if they're just using it to raise baby bees like they've been doing this spring. So everything.
Go ahead, James.
Everything they
Roger.
brought in so far has been used to raise baby bees. So there's like no extra right now.
Right. And remember, when they're not out flying because it's raining, then they're inside eating up their stores. And that's, you know, they can actually starve in the middle of, you know, the summer if it rains for 2 or 3 weeks. So you got to pay attention.
Yep. A couple years ago, we had a really, really wet May and June, and most of the farmers didn't get anything planted. And that was the first time in my beekeeping career I was feeding nukes in June when we should have a honey flow going on.
Yep.
I was feeding them because it was just like what we've been going through here right now. 1 or 2 days of sunshine and then 4 or 5 days of rain, and it was feast or famine. The 2 days they could work, the hive would be full of nectar, and you go back out after it rained and they would be bone dry empty. So it is crazy, crazy, crazy. But if you look back over history, the weather's always crazy in Ohio. So anybody else? I see Brad says it is crazy, the difference between North and South this year, but that's kind of normal. So that's why that's the bad thing about being online and people not telling you where they're at, is because it's totally different, and it can be totally different even in a general area. So good. Well, with that, if we have no more questions, we're gonna move on to Chris Blank talking about doing a hive inspection.
Gay County Beekeepers Association. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about inspections. So today when we're looking at inspections, I want to talk to you about a few different things. Let's go ahead and get started. Whenever you get into your hives, you want to have a plan. You want to know why you're getting into your hives, what your goal is, and what you're looking for. So today we're going to get in the hive on the far left. We're looking for queen cells, and we're looking for appropriate amount of space to make sure they don't need an extra box. So as you get ready to get into your hives, you want to make sure you have all your equipment ready, your smokers going, and that you can keep your smoker lit. The last thing you want is your smoker to go out once you start getting in your hives, and then you don't have smoke if you need it. You also don't want to have to take time to run and get extra frames, extra boxes, or any other equipment you might need. So make sure you have that extra equipment handy. So we're going to give them a little smoke. So first off, as I open the lid, I'm looking at population. I'm looking at how much space they're taking up in the box. That's one of my first determinations as to whether or not they need another box. This hive actually looks like they're taking up quite a bit of space, and they would be considered for another box. The other thing I'm looking for is how many frames have they built out. They built out all the way to both sides. So this frame and this frame are both built out with fully drawn comb. So this box would be ready, or this hive would be ready for another box of frames. So the first couple frames I've pulled out are food frames. If you look at the frame, you can tell it's full of honey. They're starting to cap some of it, and also in some places they've stored some pollen in this frame. So this frame is a frame of brood. If I get in here close, you can see the larvae down inside of the cells. The young larvae are well fed. You can see the royal jelly glistening off the larvae. And also you notice that they've got a ring of honey and pollen around the brood, so that they've got honey and pollen close to the bees so they can keep them fed. So as we go down into the second box, we can see we've got very good population all throughout the box. So this hive is definitely ready for a third box. So as we finish up with this hive, we noticed that we had eggs and larvae present. We didn't need to go look for the queen because we had signs of the queen and there were no queen cells present. So that gives us a good indication that while this box is very full, this hive is ready for another box. It also gives us a good indication that the hive is not thinking about swarming at this point in time. If we don't add a box very soon, there is always the possibility that this hive could swarm, and there's still the possibility they could swarm. So we'll continue to monitor the population of this hive, and also whether or not the queen is present. So at a different location, we're going to take a look at 3 more hives. So as I walk up on the hives, I'm looking at their general activity. I'm looking at seeing how active they are on the outside. The one on the far right is actually turned around backwards compared to the other two. So we can walk around and take a look at their activity. And they seem to be pretty active on the top entrance. So first glance at population. Population looks really good. Seems to be a lot of bees in here. This hive was also a split, so I'm expecting to find a queen cell or more than one queen cell in here. So as I look over this frame, again, I know this hive is queenless, just because I know it's a split. But as I look down in the combs, I notice that there's no brood or no larvae and no eggs. And then if I look down here on the very bottom of the frame, there's a capped queen cell. If I flip this frame over, again on the bottom of the frame, I see 1, 2 very large queen cells. There's a third queen cell there, but it looks like the bees have chewed it out for some reason. It's too early for it to hatch. These cells are probably still about another 4 or 5 days away from hatching based off of a queen calendar. You notice this hive, while the camera was off, I ended up with 3 frames with queen cells on it from a split. This hive was still very strong, so I went ahead again and made another split. I actually ended up making 2 small splits off of that. So this is the parent colony that had 3 frames of swarm cells in it. And then down there, there's 2 other nucleus colonies now. Both of those have a frame of swarm cells, a frame of cap brood, and a frame of honey. And hopefully in a few weeks, those queens will go out and get mated in about a week and a half to 2 weeks. And we'll end up taking this one colony, which will split off another one, and we'll end up with 3 more. But swarm prevention, I think, is another class. So this is just what we found on this inspection, and we were ready for it, and we were able to deal with it. I'm gonna get into this next hive, this middle hive, and if you notice, whenever I'm working my hives, I always work them from the back. I don't want to stand in front of the entrance and block the entrance, because I get a bunch of bees that are coming back from foraging. They'll all be buzzing around me, and they'll just create a lot of chaos. So whenever I work my hives, I always try to work them from the back side. That way I'm not standing in front of the entrance and blocking the entrance. Okay, again, if we look at the population of this hive, we don't see a lot of population in the top box, but if we look down between these frames, we see bees down in there, and we also see capped honey that was left over from winter that they still haven't got into and worked. So we're going to go to the next box down and see what we find. So as we get to the next box, we immediately notice the majority of our bees are in this area. We've still got capped honey back in here, but the population is definitely a little bit lower. So these bees still have plenty of room. But we're going to go ahead and check them and make sure they're queen right. If we take a look in this hive, as we look at this frame, we've got capped cells. As we come in here and take a closer look, we've got larvae in a couple different stages. We've got some very young larvae. We've also got some older larvae. And if we go out towards the edge, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but there's actually eggs out there. So we know that this colony is queen right. So we're just going to take a minute and see if we can find our queen. Quick search of this frame. The queen's not on this side, so we'll flip it over. And bingo, there she is. So we know this hive is queen right. They still have plenty of food in here, plus the whole top box. So even though they're still a little small, they are going and they are progressing along, and they will get caught up here pretty quick. This hive we're going to work today, these two I said were facing the correct direction. This one is actually facing backwards from the other way that I want it, but I've never moved it. So again, we're going to inspect from the back. So we're going to go around to the other side and work from behind the hive so we're not blocking the entrance. Okay, and one last time, we took the top box off. That is still capped honey that they did not get into this winter. And we're over to this box. You can see our bees are right in this area, so that's probably where our brood nest is going to be. If we look over in here, just glancing down through the frames, we can see capped honey and plenty of food stores still remain in this hive. So we'll go ahead and pull a couple frames out. We're going to see if they're queen right. Obviously, they don't need any space at this time, but we just still want to make sure that they're queen right. So again, I don't need to search for the queen. I see that I've got cat brood and I've also got open brood as these bees have been hatching, and I also see eggs down on the bottom of these cells, so I know this hive is queen right. Their population is a little low, but it's still kind of cool. It's only 50 degrees out today. We've had several cool days for the last week and a half, but I think in another week or so, this hive is really going to take off. This hive has always produced well for me, and you can see it's got an entire box of capped honey still on it. They're just usually a little bit slower to get started in the spring, but once they get going, they really take off. So the last thing I do before I leave the bee yard is I look around. I look around the yard on the ground for a cluster of bees, just to make sure that the queen didn't fly out of the hive anywhere and land on the ground, or if I accidentally dropped her and there's a cluster of bees trying to protect her. And then the other thing I do is I take a few minutes and jot down some notes. Every one of my hives has a hive tag with a number that I can keep track of in my notebook, and I also use bricks. Everybody's got a different way of using the bricks, their own system, but an upright brick, like over here, means that the hive is queenless. This means that the hive is queen right. If there's an issue with the hive, I may turn the brick like that, or I may set it up like that, depending on what's going on with the hive. But since this is a queen right hive and they have plenty of food, I'll just set the brick like that. And again, the very last thing I do before I leave the bee yard is I have a notebook of all of my hives, and then I have inspection notes. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something today. Hopefully it'll improve your inspections and make your inspections go a little bit smoother. And if you got any questions, let your instructors know, and they can get in touch with me if you got any direct questions for me. Thanks, and have a good.
Okay, I want to thank Chris for that. I made one note. You may have noticed that he didn't have inner covers, but his lids were the exact same size of his boxes. So I'm assuming he made his own lids. So it was a lid inner cover combination. So very simple. You can make your own equipment. That way the bees don't glue your outer cover. If you run an outer telescoping lid with drapes over the side of the box, you need to have some kind of inner cover for the bees to propolize things up, or you'll never get your lid off. Any questions from anybody about inspecting? He made several great points, including always work your bees from behind.
Brad has a couple questions. Spacing, 5 inches to a foot between the boxes. Is that okay? And that they were awfully low to the ground, it seemed.
Personally, I don't, 5 inches is what does work. I got double boxes. They're hooked together. I personally don't like the long racks because you do have to work them from behind, and it puts more stress on my back. I like working sideways, and I like giving myself enough room that I can work the hive from the left side or the right side from the sides.
Okay.
And as far as off the ground, like I said, I use cement blocks. Once you get up to about 12 inches, 14 inches, it keeps the skunks away better. But you got to remember, in the summertime when you have honey supers on, how tall will it get at the end of the season? So especially if you're only extracting honey
Right.
once a year, they couldn't get fairly tall. So it's a balancing act.
Right. If you know, some people leave their honey supers on all season and don't extract till the fall, and man, those stacks can get, 5, 6, 7 boxes high. It's a little hard to get 60 to 100 pounds off when it's a foot above your head. If you're going to extract, in June and then maybe later in the season, it won't be so bad.
Yep. So people recommend a little higher if you do have skunk issues, and probably most of us in the country probably do have skunk issues, but that's why I have a live trap. So.
And I also keep my hives a little closer to the ground, just because I'm a procrastinator. And again, when you're lifting heavy boxes, I do not want to lift boxes, if I can help it, that are above shoulder length or shoulder height. That then puts more strain on your back. How I deal with the inspection portion is, if I can take an empty hive body box, I will use that as my stool and sit on the side of the hive while I'm doing a more intensive inspection, just for back's sake.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe wants to know, what was the space? I don't know if you didn't see it. The video. In the video, it looked like they were pretty close together, 8 inches maybe.
Right.
But the issue is, it's up to you. If you want to be able to get all the way around your hive, put them 2 or 3 feet apart. If you don't care and you just want to work them from the back and have them close together, then it doesn't really matter.
But if you also notice in that setup, he had space between the hives on the stand, and that's where he put his lid and his box. So
and your smoker sometimes too.
Yes. So he could work those hive and still have a space between it. So my recommendation, if you're running a hive stand or a longer one, is leave those intermittent spaces between your boxes. One for orientation purpose, but also it's a little work table for you.
Right. It gives you room to set a frame down or the lid down between them. But it's nice to have that next box right next to you, so you can put your hot smoker up on that metal lid instead of in the grass where it could start a fire.
Yep. It's nice to give yourself enough work room. Like Lorene said, you can put your lid there, stack stuff off so it's not on the ground. Picking heavy boxes off the ground is also hard on your back. Never ever put your brood box or whatever, don't just throw it in the grass. At least set it on a lid. That way, in case like Chris was talking about, sometimes the queen falls off a frame. She gets excited. It's totally dark in her life, and all of a sudden you've opened it up. I like setting my boxes after I've worked on them. If I have to go deeper, I set them on my lid. That way, if she falls off, she falls on the lid. She has a chance to get back up. You don't have grass stuck to the bottom, because you're going to have pieces of burr comb. There'll be honey dripping maybe, and it just makes a mess.
Right. One of the other things to notice is, in that one of the last hives he looked at, he pulled the first box completely off, didn't even look through it. And so remember that, he knows that's a honey super, and he can look right down through the cracks and see it. You don't have to go through every single box depending on the season. It's just different every time. You basically want to know what's in it and then move on and look for your brood.
Yep. If you hang around me very much, I don't even take inner covers off honey supers. I know it's full of honey. I pick it up, don't even crack the inner cover, just take that whole box, set it to the side. And when I pick it up, I can judge the
Mhm.
weight of how heavy it is about how full it is. I always look down between the cracks to see if it's capped or not, because when they first cap that nice white wax stands out like a sore thumb. There won't be a lot of bees on it, so you can look down between the cracks of bees, and I look down between those, see what's going on. I look down between them to see if I can see capped brood or open cells. Gives me an idea of what's going on without disturbing the bees a lot.
Mhm.
The more work you can do without disturbing the bees, the happier the bees will be.
Yep.
So very good point, Jeannie. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions they want to put in the chat or unmute yourself? There isn't very many of us today, so if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free, please. Sometimes communicating verbally is easier than typing,
Mhm.
especially if you type like I do. I'm more of a chicken pecker, pecking at it, because when I took typing class in high school, I never thought I'd be typing again in my life.
Yeah.
Tell my age. It wasn't before the
Yep.
day of computers. The only
Yep.
people that typed were secretaries.
That's right.
And I had no intention of being a secretary. So it was a kind of a easy A/B class. So, okay, well, hearing none. Brad says he's got black and green screens.
Maybe that back in the day of the first
Oh,
computers. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we even had manual typewriters at my high school.
Yep, we did
Jeannie,
too.
we did get your camera on. We can see you
You
live
know what?
now. So
I was moving my hand around the camera at the top, and lo and behold, I can't see it, but there's a little door.
Oh.
And I remember my son telling me that he picked out this computer. So yeah, I can't even, honestly, I can't even see it with my
yep.
eyes and where I'm sitting, but
Okay. Well,
guess it has a little door, so I'm
Yep.
good to go.
yep.
I do have another trick though, when you're splitting hives and keep them calm. What I actually do, I make my little, they call it a quiet box, but essentially I have a couple cotton clean, we use them in the operating room. I've got a couple clean cotton shop towels, woven ones. And when I'm dealing with a big hive, two of my tricks include, one of them includes taking that towel, and as I pull that super off, that box off, I don't want to drive all my bees down to the bottom by smoking them. So I essentially gently put that box off to the side, just like on that inner cover, and I put a light cotton towel over them. They're woven versus like a terry, and that way it keeps it dark and it keeps that those bees calm in that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I do that with my bigger hives, and again, it keeps the population a little bit more manageable as you're working down.
Not so many bees in the air.
Exactly, or looking up at you.
Yep.
Looking up, they stay a lot quieter. I used to own a Chevy Blazer, and new people I'd help get started with nukes that I'd sell, and I would haul the bees in the car, and you can listen to them. And I learned to put an old sheet over the top of them while they traveled. They were dark and they stayed a lot quieter in the car, just being in that dark box versus having a screened opening at the bottom. But they write a lot better. So yep, the bees like it dark. They're used to having it dark. So the darker you can keep it inside the hive, the happier your bees will be. Very good. Thank you for that pointer, Lorraine.
I don't see any feeders. When do you stop feeding, or why is there no feeders in this videos?
Well, it depends on what time of year and how much honey flow. You noticed he talked about there was food coming in. He had the band of nectar around the baby bees. He had drawn comb. So really, the first year when you're brand new, you have no foundation, all you have is foundation. You have no drawn comb. They have to build all that. takes a lot of energy. So that's why we encourage feeding those new hives. Once you become more established, you got honey. He has honey from last year. That one hive still had a box
Right.
of honey left over from the previous year. In my preference, I would much rather feed my bees their natural food, honey, than sugar water. So if I have extra frames,
Mhm.
most of the time, once they become established, there is not a lot of feeding going on unless you really want to push your bees for some reason, like to raise queens, or if you're going to raise nukes to sell. But the bees themselves usually control that. So once you get established, you don't need to do a lot of feeding.
Yep.
Yep.
The simple answer is he was showing you established hives.
Yes. Yeah.
These are not, these are
Right.
not, and what he will do with those nooks he pulled off is probably feed. And once you have an established hive with all that drawn out comb,
Mm-hmm.
you're not feeding as much, except when you notice a problem,
Mm-hmm.
like in the dearth, or you have plans for doing something with that hive.
Right.
Making a
Randy,
split.
go ahead.
Making a split or stores are low.
Right. And Randy, if you're a new beekeeper, you have got to feed because you've got to develop all of that drawn comb. You know, once you're not putting in just foundation and you've got extra drawn comb to put in new boxes and such, you're okay. The other thing is, if once you're established and you want to sell honey, you have got to stop feeding before the honey flow is on. So you have to know your plants, because you don't want to pull fake honey out of your hives, basically. So again, the answer is different depending on how established you are, what the season is. You know, you might not be feeding, once you're established, you might not feed from mid-May to July, but then all of a sudden in mid-July or August, there's a dearth, it's not raining, there's no pollen, then you have to feed again. So it's different every season, every beekeeper, every area.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Randy. Glad we could help you.
You know, that's one of the things that's kind of coming out. There's a lot of talk about this regenerative agriculture, and bees are mentioned there. And one of the problems they're talking about these days, as far as defining what regenerative apiculture is that beekeeping is so specific to where you are. And, you know, it might be totally, your neighbor 10 miles down the road might be doing something completely different than what you're doing. It's very, very site specific.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I have, I think, 18 different locations where I have bees established, and they're different. The flows are different. Where I live is probably the least honey productive. I live on a old sand beachhead from when the glacier melted. We once the hot summer gets here, we have very little honey flow after that. But this time of year, it can be gangbusters, and it can be gangbusters in a matter of days. As with the weather change we're having right now, if I have a strong hive, it can go absolutely crazy honey flow go on, because there's so much blooming. There's so many woods, you know, woodland flowers in people's yards, whatever. But then once summer comes, it dries up. There's nothing in the woods, and everything kind of slows down and normal. But I do very little feeding of my hives, especially established hives. I feed to prevent starvation, and that's about it. I let the bees make their own honey, and I leave them plenty. So.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna introduce Don Kroc. He does a first inspection on a hive. So this would be, probably should have played this one first, but it was just done a little earlier in the year, but it's still, everybody does hive inspections just a little different. Like I said, if we have time at the end, I got a long video of starting a package and a nuke. I do inspections different than Don and Chris do. So we all learn, and we can pick up little tips from everybody.
Hello, this is Don Today's March the 17th, and I have an overwintered nuke. This was a swarm I caught last year in the middle of September, and surprisingly, it has survived the entire winter. And this would be, at this point, it'd be about the size of a package. So I'm going to explain how to do inspection. I have everything here. I have my smoker, and I like to put my frames in an empty box. I'm using a styrofoam box, and you can see that I have room between my hives here. And so I'm going to give them a little bit of smoke here in front of the entryway, just a little bit, and the hole there. So all right, I'll take my weight off my brick, and I'm going to lift up slowly. I like to use my lid here so I can put my empty box on top. So I'm going to give them a little bit of smoke down here. Oh, I should, yeah, I forgot.
Yep.
Put my veil on. And I want to explain a little bit about when the veil, if you have a hat with a little bead like a ball cap, it keeps the veil away from your face. And that way the bees have a less chance to sting you, because if the veil is up against your cheek, they could sting you. Another point too I'm going to make is that it's probably a good idea not to wear your wedding ring or any kind of ring, because if you would get stung on that finger and the finger swells up, it hurts. Okay. And I like to feed with an empty on top here. I'll take that off, and that's my feeder. I'll give them a little bit of smoke on top. Come a little closer. I'm going to take my feeder off. And these bees should be pretty tame. Like I said, it's an overwintered nuke. Take my lid off very carefully, slowly. You see there's not a lot of bees. This would be probably similar to a colony or a package bee after about 2 or 3 weeks. And I like to tell my beginners that you want to take out sort of the back frame first, so you have plenty of room. And I'm going to pull this back frame out, and you'll see you'll see how that they draw that out. And right here, there's, if you get a little closer, you can see there's nectar here, and this is all capped honey that left over the winter. And on this side, see how they hadn't filled that out? So if you have frames that aren't filled out, you'll need to feed them sugar water so they fill this out. They're really pretty gentle. I'm going to take my other glove off. And if you go very slowly, usually you're not going to anger your bees. But okay, you can see here I have some cat brood. If you look real closely, you can see the brood there. These are larvae that haven't been capped yet. It takes about day 10 before they're capped. And I see some very young larvae here that are probably 1 or 2 days old. And then there's eggs up here. You can see the eggs. I'm looking for the queen, but these are pretty much all nurse bees. And on this side, oh, she's laying on this side too. So she's laying on both sides. She's really trying to, there's the queen. See the queen right here? Right here. Get real close. See, there's my queen. And since the queen's right there, I'm going to put her back in the box. Or I'm going to put her in this, in my box here. So if she falls, she's in a closed container. And then I'm going to show you some more. This is for a September swarm. They look pretty good. And this is what cap brood looks like. See how they've capped all this over here? And that's different than the honey. Cap brood, and there's the honey. Then there's larvae and eggs on every frame here. The same on this. Well, here's the nectar. If you look real closely, that's nectar is like honey that haven't been capped yet or uncapped. But I'm feeding them sugar water, so that's probably from the sugar water. And the whole idea is try to feed your bees so they're very healthy in the springtime like this. And I am going to clean out my bottom board because this is my first inspection this year with this hive. And see, this is my empty top. I can do that. Oh, here's a frame that's full of honey. And like I said, it was an overwintered. This is all capped honey. You can see it's a little bit darker. That's like that fall honey that they've collected. So I think I'm in pretty good shape here. And then when I put them back, I'm going to do the same thing. And Julie, if you can get closer, you can see the bees here with pollen on this corner here. See the pollen coming in? They're bringing in pollen, all that pollen. And they're bringing it in now. So we're in southern Ohio, and we're probably 2 to 3 weeks early from northern Ohio. I'll clean this bottom board out, and then I'll put everything back. And that's pretty much how you do an inspection. When you do an inspection, you want to go very slowly, and the bees don't get really angry. I could have done this without a veil, and sometimes I do with packages or nukes, but I don't advise it for beginners. And all I'm doing is scraping out the bottom, cleaning it out a little bit from the winter. Then I'll put it right back in the same position. And I'm going to guess in probably next week, I'll put another deep one of frames because they're going to need some room. They're doing pretty well.
So there you go, Randy. He is still feeding his bees, so a lot depends on, time of season. That was taken earlier in the year. Feeding, he still had honey on, but by feeding it, it helps stimulate that queen to start laying eggs to get rolling because it was such a small, colony of bees. So I see we got a question in the chat.
Yeah, if you have brood growing up
Yep.
where it doesn't belong, scrape it out. Doesn't matter whether it's got brood in it or not, just get it out of there.
Yep, and they love drawing wax right next to the feeder, just like especially the warmer it gets, the more they'll start cramming comb in anywhere.
Right.
And yep, they'll do that, and you hate scraping brood out, but you need to clean that up, and they'll build it in the bee space between the boxes. I keep
Yep.
all that clean because a lot of times you don't know where your queen is, and if you got two pieces of burr comb that come down together and there's bees there, they get smashed, and smashing a couple workers isn't too bad, but you sure don't want to smash your queen. So I clean all burr comb off.
Right.
I put it in a can, I bring it home, I melt it down. I just
Yep.
don't throw it in the bee yard.
Right.
One, it can attract small hive beetles. My luck is I would step in it and then track bee guts and honey into the house, and then I'd get in trouble. So that's what happens to me.
Well, and remember that the whole purpose of the Langstroth hives or any of the other kind of hives people are using today is that the law is that we keep bees in a hive that's organized, that can be inspected by pulling things out and looking at it. If you just let, burr comb grow everywhere and they make a big mess, or they've got wonky comb in the middle and stuff, then when you inspect, you can't really see everything.
When you
So
scrape the bottom board, should it be away from the hive?
What depends on how messy it is, Joe.
yeah,
If I have lots of crud on it, yeah, I'll walk it away and scrape it somewhere. Like usually if I have a field close by, I scrape it into the field. That way I know I'm not walking in it. But like he said, the first time in the year, about the only time I get down to the bottom board, strip down like that, is the first time in the year, clean it out. A lot of times there's dead bees that the live
Right.
bees haven't hauled out yet. So you help them out, get rid of some of that crud that's in there. And after that, the bees pretty much do their own housekeeping. But sometimes in the spring, you got to give them a hand and get any crud out.
well, and if you run screen bottom boards, then you don't really have to do that.
But
I
But
was
again-
wondering about like what could be in that, like hives, beetle hives or whatever. My tongue's getting messed up.
oh, it's all right.
And he just set like the box right back on top of it.
Yep, I put it right back in the same spot. If I was down there and I saw hive beetle larvae or wax moth larvae, I'd definitely be smashing the larvae and dumping it away from the front of the hive. But in the spring, we don't have larvae. It's more just dead bees, lots of wax from them chewing wax cappings to eat the honey that's underneath it during the winter, stuff like that.
But the point is well taken, Joseph, that truly you should try and keep your apiary neat and clean, primarily with scrapings and burr comb. You don't really want to throw that by your hives. It will attract more skunks and critters and coons. So point well taken. I try and scrape my bottom board away from the hives. And if you're in a small area, like an urban setting, just take a bucket with you and scrape it in there and dispose of it. But do try and keep a neat apiary.
Or have an extra bottom board with you. So if you only have a couple hives, work the first hive, put the new bottom board on, take the old bottom board, take it, wash it off, put it in your, with the hose up at the house, dry it off, bring it back, put it on the next hive.
But I do the same as Roger. I got a lot of my bees in the field, so I will walk that bottom board when I'm doing first inspection, and I will scrape that and the slider away from my hives.
Yep. I was going
Thank
to
you very
add
much.
to, you're welcome, Joe. I was going to add to Jeannie's. A lot of times those sliders that for bottom screen boards, they have a lot of crud on them and they get cleaned out because the bees can't clean it. It's below the screen. That does build up. Wax moth will live in there. So you need to clean that more than just once a year. That needs to come out probably at least monthly, if not more, when it's in during the summer working season. I don't pull it in at all during the winter, but this time of year I'm cleaning them out. They're a real gooey mess this time of year. And definitely get dumped in the field for organic matter. So with that, it's 10:23. If nobody has any more questions, we'll take a few minute break. Everybody wants to go to the restroom, get another cup of coffee, whatever. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes. How about that? And Carol Kralik will be up with mite biology. And if I need Jamie to hook us up with music during intermissions.
Me access. Grant me access to share. I'll hook you up.
You're co-host.
I'll set it up here. Pandora.
Unless people have questions, we'll keep answering questions, what we normally do. So. Oh, I just have to remember to edit all this out so we don't get in trouble for poaching music. Next, we're going to talk about the evil, dreaded Varroa mite. And Carol Kralik is on the call. She'll be able to answer questions when we get all done. I thank you, Carol, for doing this video for us. And with that, we're going to get started here.
Hi, my name is Carol Kralik, and I'm going to be talking today about Varroa destructor, the Varroa mite. I'm a beekeeper in Stark County. I belong to the Stark County Beekeepers Association. I've been keeping bees about 15 years, and I have lost many a colony because of this pest. I had not prepared myself initially when I first began beekeeping in how to contain it and understand it, and hopefully you won't make the same mistakes I have made. So let's get on with it. I hope you enjoy it. And there it is, Varroa destructor. It's an interesting organism, but if you hate it, I certainly understand. It is devastating to the western honeybee. Varroa destructor is a mite. It is closely related to spiders and to ticks. It has 8 legs, just like these other organisms, and it lives on the outside of the western and eastern honeybee. Now, why do I mention the eastern honeybee? Well, it's because at one time, Varroa destructor was a parasite only on the eastern honeybee. This is the region where Apis cerana, the eastern honeybee, resided. In the 1950s, it jumped to Apis mellifera. It was because we started moving Apis mellifera hives around the world. It was a much more prolific producer of honey and a much better pollinator. So it was commercially advantageous to take this bee into regions where it had not existed or had not existed for a very long time. You can see from this photo that there's a pretty big difference between the size of the two bees. Varroa breeds within the brood cells in a colony. And because Apis cerana, the eastern honeybee, is so much smaller, it only had room to go into the drone brood cell. The drone brood is a small amount of the total brood in any bee colony. Usually, I'd say maybe it was about 10% or less of the total brood, and sometimes doesn't exist at all. When this mite crossed over to Apis mellifera, it could enter into the larger cells of the worker bee and also the drone bee. So it had a whole hive within which to breed. Also, Apis cerana is a more hygienic bee. It cleans itself, it cleans its housemates, and it also drags out infected brood. So that was a control mechanism for Varroa also. We have bred the western honeybee to be a gentle, lovable, fuzzy little girl. And so she's not nearly as aggressive at cleaning herself and her colony mates. Also, she doesn't drag out infected brood. And they're trying to develop some bees that do that, but it's slow go right now. So again, it had the entire colony within which to enter the cells, and it didn't get scraped off the bodies of the bees or have the infected larva drug out. There are two phases of the life cycle of Varroa destructor. One is the traveling phase, often called the phoretic phase, where the Varroa travels on the adult bee. It may travel out of the hive if the bee is a forager, or it might travel from a newly emerged bee to another cell about to be capped. But it is free of the brood cell. Now you see this mite here on the thorax of the bee. You will rarely find a mite on the thorax. Usually they have just crawled onto the bee or maybe are about to crawl off. But if you see a mite on the thorax of a bee, you have mites in your hive. And not only do you have one mite in your hive, you probably have thousands of mites, because it is rare to see a mite this exposed. Usually in the adult phase, they crawl under these chitinous plates and latch on to the fat bodies, which are a gland below the protective plates of the abdomen of the bee, and feed there. And there's also a stationary phase where the bee is kept in one place, primarily by the capped cell. It's the reproductive phase. So the adult female enters a brood cell just prior to it being capped and begins to lay eggs. This is a life cycle of Varroa destructor within a colony. You can see that this is the traveling or phoretic mite. It's on a bee, but it comes off a bee and enters a brood cell. It is now known as a foundress. And in 60 hours after capping, it lays its first egg, almost always a male. Every subsequent egg after that will yield a female mite. And when the first female mite matures, the already mature male mite will mate with it, and every subsequent mature female mite that develops within the brood cell. So you can have several bred mites within the brood cell. And when the bee emerges, all of those female mites emerge. This is another depiction of Varroa in the brood cell. You can see that it enters just before capping. The cell is capped, And what the mite does, first, what the foundress does, is drill a hole into the side of the pupa. This is a feeding station for all of the mites within the brood cell. So the bee has been wounded, and it is having its nutrients removed during a very important time of development of this organism. It also creates a little excrement pile where the mites go to poop, because everything poops. And it is also the breeding ground for the mites. So the mites mature, usually one, sometimes there are two that emerges on the body of the adult bee. Any immature mites and the son, the male mite, die within the brood cell. So you have enough brood cells, and eventually you can grow quite a colony of mites. Drone brood cells are preferred. The foundress lays additional eggs because the development time of the drone bee is 1 day longer. So usually one more mated mite can emerge. And just to show you a little bit about the timeline for the maturation of the different classes, if you count the days that these cells are capped, you'll see that there is actually one more day that the drone brood worker is capped. That, like I said, can result in one more mite emerging. What happens to brood when Varroa creates that feeding hole and removes nutrients? Its lifespan has been shortened. Drones are smaller and they're less fertile. There are learning behaviors that foragers no longer have. Sometimes they don't return to the hive. Sometimes they may not gather pollen or nectar effectively. Nurse bees are less attentive, so the entire colony is being less well cared for. And lastly, viruses are introduced when the mite wounds the bee. The mite can carry quite a few viruses, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. In the adult bee, it once again is wounded. The Varroa mite crawls underneath the chitinous plates and latches on to the fat bodies inside of the bee. Once again, because it exchanges secretions with the bee, viruses are introduced, and the bee's stores of fat, perhaps during a very important time in its life, are removed. This disease of the bee is called varrosis. And when enough bees have varrosis, the entire colony gets sick. The name for that is parasitic mite syndrome. And I'm just going to take a moment to read this because this is important in my opinion. I think all of you will see this sometime in your beekeeping lives. On examination of your honeybee colony's brood, you observe symptoms that might resemble European foul brood, maybe American foul brood and or sac brood disease, but you're not sure exactly what the problem is. It's neither one nor the other, because nothing in your hive is characteristic of a single disorder. So there's a combination of symptoms from all three brood diseases. There might be further degradation of the colony because of bacterial infection, because larvae and pupa have died, and the colony is always infested with Varroa mites and perhaps with tracheal mites too. This is a picture of what you might see. A shotgun pattern or spotty brood. You'll see a lot of sunken dead larvae, some of them yellowed, which is characteristic of European foul brood, but it's not. You might see mummified larvae, characteristic of sac brood, but it's not. And generally, you'll look at it, and I have done this, and I know many other people have done this, and said, something's wrong here. Maybe if I put it back and check it in a week, it'll look better. And it doesn't. Trust me, it doesn't. And you still may not know what to do. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the viruses that are introduced into the colony by Varroa. You'll hear time and time again that there are multiple viruses that are associated with the presence of Varroa in the hive. Upwards of 30 have been identified. There are 2 especially that are problematic within the hive and that we know definitely are vectored or introduced into the body of the honeybee by the Varroa mite. And that is deformed wing virus. Visible symptoms are deformed wings. You'll also see a shortened, bloated abdomen, which is really sort of hard to tell. It's caused by infection. The mite load has to be pretty high for bees to develop symptoms. Deformed wing virus can be present in your hive, but your entire colony might be asymptomatic. However, the presence of deformed wing virus is very closely associated with winter losses. If you see deformed wing, I have read, you will almost certainly lose that hive. And if you kill the viruses, if you control the viruses after you see deformed wing, you may still have deformed wing virus in your hive because it also can be carried from bee to bee. The other virus is acute bee paralysis virus. Bees are often described as looking greasy because they've lost their body fuzz or body hair. Oftentimes they'll be shaking, their wings will vibrate as they crawl around the ground. And it's once again an indication that you have viruses inside your hive and that your hive is in jeopardy of being lost. Before we go, I would like to show you the life cycles of both Apis mellifera and Varroa destructor within a colony. They have slightly different times when they reach their maximum population, and this will help you understand when you need to be on your guard for protecting the colony against Varroa.
Varroa destructor is an obligate parasite of honeybees with no alternative host, so the two have a close interrelationship. Here we represent the theoretical growth of a healthy colony without mite treatments in the northern hemisphere. In winter, colonies are typically comprised of all adult winter bees, shown here in dark blue, with very little worker brood, represented in light brown, and low Varroa mite populations present on the adult bees. By late winter, the colony substantially increases its brood rearing, and the few surviving Varroa mites invade cells for reproduction. As these new bees emerge in early spring, the colony expands rapidly in adult bees, shown in yellow, and brood. The colony commences rearing drone brood, represented in dark brown, which is preferentially invaded by Varroa mites. Varroa mites reproduce during the cap brood stage of bee development, so potentially every 12 days in worker brood and every 15 days in drone brood, shown here by the red circles. In contrast, a honeybee colony typically only reproduces via swarming once per year, shown by the yellow circles. After swarm season, the bees stop rearing drones. Now all of the Varroa are forced to reproduce in worker brood. If the colony experiences a midsummer nectar dearth, the brood nest contracts and Varroa start to appear on adult bees. However, the majority of Varroa are still hidden out of sight in the worker brood. It isn't until late summer, when both the bees and brood nest area have contracted, that we start to see Varroa mite levels above treatment thresholds on our adult bee population. Late summer is also when colonies are rearing winter brood, represented in light blue. These emerge and become the long-lived winter bees, shown in dark blue. Winter bees have an extra layer of fat body, the organ Varroa mites preferentially feed upon. As the colony stops rearing brood in the late fall, Varroa are forced to exist on adult bees and have no place to reproduce. The mite population sinks accordingly, and we repeat the entire cycle once again.
So I just have a few more things to say about recognizing reliable information. As you know, there's a whole lot of things that are fun on the internet, but not all of them are true. So when you are looking for reliable bee information, look to the institutions of higher learning that are associated with land-grant schools. and that have extension offices. Try the University of Florida. There's a bee researcher named Jamie Ellis down there that has put together a phenomenal program. Also, University of Minnesota has a great bee program, and there are others. So take time to look for those websites that end in edu. Also, you can go to beekeeping organizations. Those extensions for their websites usually end in .org, and there are many very reliable sources of information out there. Be wary of YouTube. I have a site that I love to watch, or a YouTube channel that I love to watch, called the Norfolk Honey Company. But there's some bizarre ideas about how to keep bees, both on the internet and in other web pages. So take a minute. And lastly, the one thing that I would like to really say about beekeeping is that it brings so much more than a jar of honey into your life. It teaches you to think in different ways. It makes you learn about another organism besides yourself. You meet great people, and you can develop some really spectacular friendships. So consider it as more than a hobby, and really I think, a life expansion. And on that note, I bid you a great beekeeping life. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol, for that. Does anyone have questions primarily for Carol to answer, since this is her mite biology? The thing I will add right now is, no matter what you hear, mites are the #1 killer of our honeybees.
Yep.
There's lots and lots of things that kill honeybees, but the mites kill far more colonies of honeybees than probably everything else combined. Carol,
Yep.
you want to add anything, please?
When people ask, why did my bees die? I say, prove it is not mites. You know, do a mite wash. If you have a hive that died over the winter, collect the bees from wherever you can get them and do a mite wash. Look at the bottom pan, do a mite wash on the debris in the bottom pan, and see. You won't get an accurate mite load per number of bees, but you will be able to see if mites exist. And then, if they don't exist, you can go and look for other reasons that your hive may have died. But usually it's mites.
That is very correct. Thank you, Carol. I read on Facebook posts and everything where the new beekeepers always complain about the veteran beekeepers always blaming everything on mites, but we've been around long enough, and that is usually the issue, is mites. And they're hard to see. You very seldom will see one, but they are there.
Think about fleas on dogs and cats. You know, if you have a pet, you're going to have fleas. There's just no other way around it. And you can either treat your pet, or you can have a house and furniture and body parts and beds full of fleas in your house. It's a choice you make. Fortunately for treating mites in our situation, we do have what are considered chemicals, but they are chemicals made from things found in nature and just concentrated. You know, the oxalic acid is found in spinach and rhubarb, and the thymol treatments. What is that? Apivar, Jamie, or
Yes.
all right, Roger.
Yep.
That's thymol from thyme. One of them comes from hops. What's the other one? There's a third one.
Formic acid.
And formic acid is also found in green leafy plants.
And it is also a component of honey.
Yes.
What you have to understand is that these chemicals are much more concentrated,
Right,
when they are applied to the hive.
right.
But you need to do something, you will lose your hive. Now, there are some mechanisms and some strains of bees that can be used to control Varroa in the hive. But the new beekeeper will not be proficient in beekeeping to do that until later in his beekeeping life. So use these things and they will benefit you. You will have a hive that could potentially survive. I won't promise anything, but you have much more of a likelihood for your hive to survive when you control the mites.
And I'll go on record on this as a county inspector. Every colony, I'll say 95% of the time that any of the beekeepers in my county lose bees, it's Varroa related. Now, there's also hive beetle, wax moth, and other things. So that's that little 5% that you do see if you're not maintaining or watching your bees. But 95% of the time, it's the colony that gets or starts to get a disease, starts to get snotty brood, starts to get deformed wing virus, and then by the time it gets ready to crash is when they call the inspector and ask, and the first thing I ask, and if you're in Defiance County or around me, or you ask me, I always ask, what's your mite count? And I ask you and I plead with you, please do your mite count every month, and then you'll see when that starts to peak out and get away from you, what should you do? And that's when the Honeybee Health Coalition book is essential. And then your area resources, club members, inspector, your mentors and things like that to stay on top of that.
Also, you will not completely ever clear your hive of mites. You will control the mite population. You will not eliminate the mites. It is rare to have a hive without any mites at all.
And I'll add, I think everybody here, we would all love to go back to the 60s where we didn't have to put chemicals in our hives. But if you want your hive to live more than a year, you need to control the mites. There are organic things to do. There's green drone brood, but it takes a lot of work. It takes some training. You need more and more education. And I'll agree with Jamie and Carol, there's always going to be mites in your hive. You have neighbors with bees. We have wild bees living in trees that spread the mites. So even though you're clean today, doesn't mean you're going to be clean in September 1, because they'll pick them up somewhere. Anyone else want to add anything?
Don't forget to test for mites after the treatment.
Right.
You've got to know whether the treatment was effective.
What happens when your mite population is greater after treatment? What does that mean? It could mean that the mites, for the treatments that we use, that we like to use because they're natural, most do not penetrate the brood cap.
Right.
And that's a whole nother lecture. Not for this, but you have to understand that sometimes you will see a greater number of mites, a greater percentage of mites after you have treated, simply because the mites have emerged with the new bees. And you can't treat immediately. Right. I would recommend waiting. Anybody disagree?
Waiting to treat again, you mean?
Waiting to treat again, not doing it immediately, or maybe varying the treatment.
That's what I would do, is use something different.
Yep, maybe whatever you use, the bees are a little resistant to, weather, everything. But I agree with you, Carol, wholeheartedly there, that you need to monitor the mites before and after treatment. Vary your treatments. Don't use the same thing over and over. And,
the other adage I would add to that video describes the seasonality of what you're seeing with your drone versus worker brood. And it's important to, when you're choosing treatments and repeating treatments and doing your check following a treatment, is to add in that seasonality, because when that queen is shutting down her brood, her egg laying and brood rearing season is primarily over, you will get another upswing in your mite count. Additionally, you need to remember in the fall, you may have hives absconding or late swarms, you can get a secondary uptick when you had a clean wash. So you need to do a late in season, and by that I'm meaning October. Check on mites before you put them to bed. And it's also the reason and rationale that a lot of beekeepers will do a cleanup treatment. And by that, I'm primarily talking about oxalic acid dribble or a vape, oftentimes around Thanksgiving, because your brood rearing is over. So don't be fooled into thinking you got a clean mite wash that you quit checking mite levels.
And also if your hive survives without treatment the first year, you will carry mites forward, always already having established a fair population into the second year. That's when people tend to lose hives. When they don't treat, they will wait. And if you saw Kirsten Trainer's video, that video is excellent. Watch it and watch it again and watch it again, because it will, as Lorraine said, explain when mites emerge and how they're after the peak of the bee population.
Yep, and trust us, we're going to walk you through this. We're going to, next month, we'll show you how to do an alcohol wash. We're going to preach and preach and preach about controlling mites, doing your mite washes from now until November. So this isn't the first and last that you're going to hear mites out of us. So it's never ending. So anybody have any questions? I think we haven't had any questions from the audience. It's been the experienced beekeepers preaching the bad news. Jamie, are you ready again?
Sir.
So Jamie's going to talk, we're going to talk again about reading frames. There's a lot to learn of reading frames, different things going on, and this. So reading frames number 2 by Jamie, and Lorraine, and Jamie's gonna walk us through here. All right, Jamie, thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to tell you about, this is an essential skill that you have to be able to open up your colony and see what's going on and know what's going on in each frame and on each side. So let's go ahead, and I want to thank Jeannie for putting this together and for learning for putting these photos together, because we're all in the bee yards with sticky pollen and honey and everything else in your hands, and it's hard to always take time to take photos. So starting off with this first one, you know, when you put the colony down, what do you see in the frame? So identifying and knowing all together as a whole what's going on in that colony. So what do we see in this colony right here on this frame? You pull it up. So I want you in the chat. I'm going to pop the chat down here so I can watch it and monitor it. So what do we see in the upper left and right hand corners? So everybody, I want everybody, instead of you being quiet, go ahead and tell me what we see in the corners. So Brad, honey, capped honey. Very good. So right here in the upper left hand and right hand corners, we have a little bit of capped honey. In the dead center, what kind of brood do we see? Yeah, we see capped. But can you tell me what type of or worker brood? Dottie says worker brood. Worked brood. Now you typed it fast. I'll give you that. So we have tons of worker brood, and the nice thing about this is it's all nice and capped. It's nice and even. Here on the right hand corner, you'll start to see a little bit of drones. So that's them. That's the cells that are raised up just about a 1/4 inch, if not probably a 1/16 of an inch more. But it's a nice pattern. You do have some heater holes up here in the left and right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nice even pattern. A nice frame of brood. And you got tons of nurse bees. And all they're doing right at this point, they're just maintaining the heat. So when they start to emerge, and then that's a pretty good frame. So if you see that on there, let me ask this: when is that worker brood going to emerge? So tell me how soon is that going to emerge from the egg till emerging for worker brood? Put that in the chat. Holes may be where they put some pulled out dead or sick larvae. That could be. That's a good thing, Jeannie. Joseph, 21 days. Bullseye, buddy. So in this, where do we see the queen? And I want you to turn around when you pull up a frame. I want you to scan it from left, right. If you want to take a couple in the bottom, left, right, up, down, up, down. If you start to see drones, the big eyes, so right here in the bottom, right here in the middle, you start to see that big bumble butt of the boys and those eyes that are put together. And everybody picked it out. Bottom left in the 2-inch, correct. We want to see that extra long abdomen. And that is a mated queen. It is a little bit harder to see virgin queens because her whole abdomen is not extended out. She doesn't have that full 8 microliters of semen. So a virgin queen is going to be a little bit harder, especially if it's just born or you run and put in or something swarmed. It's going to be a little bit harder to find her. So when you're scanning, please remember, you don't always have to see this queen also. If you're scanning back and forth and you want to know if this colony's still in really good condition, all you have to do is see eggs that are standing up or eggs at the bottom of the cells. And then you know that she's laid eggs within the last 24 hours. So a good one on that. If you see the queen, please be gentle with that frame. When you roll it over, if you're going to look at the other side, remember, her body's 3 times that size. She might fall off into the grass. If you want to sit around put her, Lorraine had a good comment in there, and I know a couple others do it. Have a nuke off to the side where you take that frame and put her in they call it a quiet box, where you can put it over there, put a sheet over the top, or put a rice bag. You can do a couple different things. Close that up so you know where she's at and she's safe and sound. And then you can do your hive inspection a little bit quicker because you know she's in there. But do not be surprised. As much as I've turned on kept bees, do not be surprised if you turn on and see another queen in that colony. Say this queen's way down low and the other one's up high. No roller coaster spins. Yeah, you don't want to take that queen and turn around and have her on there because she's trying to run from you. She doesn't like the light. She's not used to being in the light. So if she walks around the bottom edge and she falls off, always turn around before you walk away. Know that you had her in a quiet box. My personal preference, what I do, I take a metal queen clip and I clip the queen and I put her in that cage. And then I put her off to the side, off into the corner so the nurse bees can still feed her, crawl up and they can feed her. And then I rip through that colony, go through that colony a little bit quicker and I know where she's at. And then I take that clip and I release her on the front landing board and I automatically bring her to the bottom and let her start laying again. So that's just my practice in it. So on to the next frame. I want you to identify A. And right now we're probably going to see not as many colors, but what do we see in A? Dottie and Eric say bee bread. Anybody else? Brad agrees. It is. And the reason you can say it's bee bread, you see that little bit of shininess on it. So they've put a layer of honey on it and they're starting to ferment that pollen and make it into bee bread. Let's go into C. Or B. So what do we have in B? What would I call that? It's right on the B. Is it a worker, drone, or queen? Workers. Very good. And we know just by, and this is a good time, if they're not real thick, if they're not a real big buildup, is to look left and right. Look at the condition of their wings. Are they deformed? You're not going to see the wings at all. They'll have these little tiny nubs in the back. Are they K-wing, where 2 wings are laying back perfectly and the other ones are kicked out like a K? You could instantly see that in a K-wing condition because that other wing is sitting way up by the head and you'll know your Varroa load is too much. Same way if you have deformed wing virus. If you see a bunch of bees walking around and they have no wings, your Varroa load is way over maximum and you're starting to pick up that disease. C. What do we call C? And it's the overall around here, all of this. Brad, eggs. It's a good one. You could have some eggs in there. But if you look down here in this, I see older larvae because I can see the fat little C's. And Jeannie had in this, and those are all good guesses. Jeannie has open comb. So this is places where the queen can lay. And what you do, the best way to look down inside of these, there's a couple different ways. Put the sun over your shoulder if it's got enough sunlight. Let it shine over to your shoulder. Hold the frame up about a 10-degree angle away from you and look inside them cells. Do not be afraid of getting some cheater glasses. If you need bifocals or trifocals. Or you use a magnifying glass. I know some people that use the real big, go to Harbor Freight, get the big magnifying glass. You have to be able to identify what's in the bottom of those cells. So did you know, do you have eggs? Do you have your queen there? Sometimes there's people that tell me I can't see eggs. If you can't see eggs, you're not going to know if your queen's been there in the last 48 to 72 hours. And on top of that, if you don't even know if all of a sudden you start getting a laying worker or anything like that. So that's a skill, even if you have to cheat, I mean, there's no problem with that. Let's go down to D. What do we find in D? Everybody jumped on that one. A queen, absolutely. And we know that by the long abdomen that's extended out. And on this one, she's just out walking around and she's smelling. She's looking for that nice clean cell to turn on lay in, and she's going to turn on lay in it. So overall, is the condition of this frame pretty good? Would you, Tehran, stick that back in the box? Give me a yes or a no. Or how would you treat this frame? And you would treat it very gently. Brad, perfect, like gold, because right there's the queen. You know, if you're going to go with the other one, you're going to put her in a quiet box. You take that frame, put it in the quiet box. You're going to use my method. You're going to take a queen clip, put her in, and put her off the side. Or if it's a small colony, put that frame right back in the box and let that queen go. And also, if you put it back together, please watch when you're shoving the frames back in. If you have the queen on this side in the box, and the next frame it comes in, you put it in the gap and you slide it over quickly. Now you've just killed the queen that way. So please be careful. Watch where she's at and put it in just like a fragile crystal. What do you see in this in A? So we're right up top here in the middle. Then you guys can unmute yourself also. We have capped honey. And a worker bee adding honey. Very good, Brad. Or she could be adding nectar. So if she's adding nectar, she's going to turn on, and that's from her midgut. She's going to turn on and add that nectar in, and it's going to convert it into honey after they get the moisture level down and it starts to ferment. What's Jeannie got? Oh, that's a good one. What's all this stuff around the outside on the frame on B? And you guys will learn this on these 80, 90-degree days.
Burr comb.
Yep, you got a little bit of burr comb. But what's also in this corner?
Oh. Can't say the word. Populus? Pupillus?
Propolis.
Propolis.
And
Annie's favorite stuff.
Yep. The hotter it gets for the bees or outside for us, so when it gets that 80, 90 degrees, your leather gloves are going to get propolis between it. It's going to be sticky. You're going to pull it up. Another thing to do if you want to extend to the life of your gloves, your $30, $40 gloves, put a nitro glove over the top of your leathers. So when you start getting into all this propolis, and then you just pull those off, and you're good. Your leather gloves are good and still conditioned. So overall, a really good frame. We see tons of nurse bees on here walking around. They're Tehran, and there's open nectar. So it's not, this is all the cap, so it's under the 18.1 in the moisture level. So that's capped. That's real honey. This is still considered open nectar because it's not below the 18.1. So it's not completely into stable honey yet. but it's a really good frame. Put it back in the box and away you go. I will never say never on this. We always kind of, the rule, the books and everything else say the queen always stays in the brood. I will say this as a queen rearer. I had 220 colonies at one point. Never say never that the queen is not on top. She's walking around on some honey. So until you spot her or identify her, always be careful with each frame. Next one. What do you see? Right dead center.
Laying queen.
Laying queen, exactly that. Her abdomen is extended. We have tons of nurse bees up on each side of her, and you'll catch that. If you pull that frame and she goes walking over the top, she will spot. You really spot her real quick. But also, if there's 3 and 4 layers of bees and this colony is built up very thick, you might not see her because she might be running underneath all the bees. So just, again, just be careful with each thing. If you find her, you find her. If you don't, just be careful with each frame.
If you're not sure, look at her wings. See how they're about half the size of her body?
Yep.
That's very telltale. A lot of times people will think a big drone is the queen, but their wings are longer. So that's one of the good tell. And the big
old bald
thorax.
spot.
Yep.
The big thorax in the center and the wings on a mated queen, the wings will come back to the 3rd or 4th targa. The targa are the segments in between. So if you look here, 1, 2, 3, there's the wingtip. That means she's a fully mature queen.
And again, with the virgin queen that are hard to spot, you can spot them by the bald spot. They don't have that elongated, the wings will not be telling, nor will the abdomen, but the bald spot will be there.
And on a virgin queen, that 6th or 5th and 6th targa here will be up behind the wings because her fallopian tubes and everything haven't sexually matured. She hasn't taken a flight. And even after she does, it'll take about a week or two. When she starts walking around, as she walks back and forth, that semen will go up into the spermatheca, and then she'll start to lay.
And the other, that's a good definitive, whether you have a newly mated queen or a mature, ready to lay eggs, or a virgin. Plus 2, I always tell people you're looking on the frame for the queen, and you're looking for the Southern Belle sachet on a mated queen. She'll kind of move that big butt and that skirt around in a sachet.
Sachet. I will remember that.
Love it. That's good.
Okay, so what do we have in this frame? Over the top. Let's start with that. Over the top, what do we have? Nectar. Absolutely. Good job, Joseph. So we have open nectar up top. You'll see over here in the right-hand corner, just a little bit, they're starting to cap it. So they're starting to get that down below the 18.1 and make it stable. Over the top of this is all open nectar. Then in this top edge corner, you'll see those fat C's, or those bigger larvae. And all it is, remember, she's an egg. All of them are eggs for 3 days, and then they drop, and then there's the 3 or 4 days difference overall between the large larvae or if it's drone brood. But up in here, it's all worker brood. You'll see the small larvae here, the fat larvae. That means it's completely filled up with the larvae, and they're getting ready to stand up and turn into a pupa, and then they're going to get capped. So some over here, like this one, you'll see that this just is starting to get capped. Same way down here. Down here, what's going on with these? They're empty. You see bees' heads back down inside. So what do we have going on? Lorene, new wax in the upper right. Yes. The flow is on with white wax. And Brad, hatching. Yes, very good. You'll see these holes where they're hatched. You might even see the bees' head coming back out and getting ready to come out. If you ever see little tiny blonde bees, and it also depends on the species, but the little tiny blonde bees that are almost colorless, those are the new ones that have emerged. Within 24 to 48 hours, they'll start taking on the coloring and starting to build that up. So this is either one of two things. They're emerging, and that's a good sign. If you ever see nectar in all of these holes, So all of a sudden you see tons of bees that are starting to emerge out here, but they're filling all these holes back up with nectar. That means the flow
You're
is
out of
so
step.
heavy, they're starting to backfill. If they start backfilling and there's nowhere for the queen to lay, that means they're getting ready to kick into swarm. So if you ever open that up and see tons of nectar inside where those that should be held open. So let's look at this whole thing. Here's this whole football or this arc. If I ever see tons of nectar down inside here where there's brood, that means they're getting backfilled. That means you need on another box. You need a frame of foundation or a frame of drone comb to open that back up so they can get that done. At this point, if you see this much open nectar at the top, I would, on the next box on the top, put a whole entire box of foundation or checkerboard with foundation, drone comb, and give them something because they're starting to fill in very fast.
Right. And Jamie, it's just putting a box on top isn't all you have to do, correct? Don't you
No,
need to
no.
put some open frames in the
Yep.
brood box?
And on that next box up, so if this was your bottom box, and we're talking beginners here,
Right.
if this is your bottom box, look for a frame with all eggs. And then take that frame and put it in the center of the next box up. And what it's going to do, it's going to take all these nurse and house bees and draw them up into the next box so they start taking care of the brood. Remember, brood is the most important thing for the colony. And that'll draw them up into the second box, and then they'll start hitting on both sides, drawing that out, the next one, the next one, the next one. Because if you just put on a box, and like, I'll go to Jeannie's point, if you just put on a box of all foundation, they might sit in the bottom box and not even go upstairs, fill that all out, get jam-packed and get a backflow of nectar, and then pull queen cells out and they swarm. And I see a
Especially if,
lot of that.
yeah, especially as a new beekeeper, you'd probably be putting on a box of just foundation.
Yep.
So, take a frame of eggs, put it in the upper box, and put an open frame or an undrawn frame back in your brood box
Exactly.
to replace the one you've pulled up.
Before you move on, Jamie,
Yes.
I'll make a point. When we're looking for the queen, I look for frames where the queen can lay eggs. So this one's being filled with honey or nectar at the top. It's mainly capped. There's not very many places for the queen to lay eggs. So this is a frame where the queen is very unlikely to be. Same with in the nectar boxes or the honey supers. They're full of honey. She has no place to lay. That last one where we saw the queen in the middle, it was all open. One more, like this one. See where all this open area down at the bottom is somewhere for her to lay eggs, and she's right there laying eggs. So when there's open room, that's where I really concentrate on looking for a queen if I need to find a queen.
That's a very good point, Roger. So what do we have here? Evaluate it. I want you to just look at it real quick, and what action do you need to take? What are you going to have to worry about in 21 days? And as this is already capped, so it's capped on the 10th day, what's going to happen after that? This is a medium, so you're going to have roughly 6,000 of them exploding out. This is 6,000 on this side. On the other side, mites. That's a good point. If this was a younger one before you started getting a lot of drones, so you want to monitor your mite count. Space, absolutely, Jeannie. This is starting to get jammed up. If both sides of the frame were like this, and if you look underneath, here's another full frame that's all capped.
Yep.
Not enough food. Very good point.
They'll start hatching.
Nectar flow going.
We're all gonna start hatching.
Yep.
So if you find all of a sudden, you guys might get into this, tons of nectar. I hear it for us up here in Northwest Ohio, it's only going to be another 2 days, and we're going to have 80-degree days. And like Roger said, the swarms are going to be kicking. Once they completely fill all your brood boxes up, if it's all capped brood, you have to have enough room for all those nurse bees to do something. They have to work, or you'll get into a swarm condition. What do you see in this frame?
Capped honey.
All capped honey. This does, for some people, I've heard, this looks like cappings, but look how wonky the lines are. You don't see individual cappings.
The other thing about being able to tell as a new beekeeper between brood and honey is that there aren't any bees on this often.
No.
You know, this is done, so there's no reason for the bees to be on it. You know, if it's brood, you're going to have bees crawling around on it taking care of things.
And for this, if you start to tear it open, look where the bees are at. If you tear any of this open, they're instantly in emergency mode to try and get that lapped up and get it sealed back underneath. But this, and I've had some people, I had a person in one of my beginner class go, I see this frame. She sent me a picture just like this. And she goes, I don't know what to do with all these baby bees. I said, well, bring that frame to me and I'll show you. Brought it to the house. I took my finger, shoved it in it, and I said, here's what it is. So, yeah, that's all capped honey.
So is the darker capping, is that older honey or?
Nope. The cappings are going to be different colors depending on what the nectar flow was. So the nectar or the quote honey on this one is right up against the capping.
Okay.
So it's completely filled. Some of these you'll see at an angle where remember the bees don't build perfect frames. They go along and depending on the flow, how much frame wax is drawn. Sometimes you'll see this flow in between the two frames that should be straight. And as one bulges out, the other one sinks in. But they will always maintain that 3/8 perfect spacing. I had a observation hive in my house, and I used to pull it all apart. After you put it back together, I sat one time and watched the bees for over 3 weeks take all those frames and eat all the wax out and rebuild everything back to 3/8. I mean, that is absolutely important to them. If like the frames were touching in some places where there was capped honey, they chewed all that back out to 3/8 and rebuild it back into that 3/8 gap. So remember, when you're tearing things and moving things around, excess burr comb like this, I mean, get rid of it and try to keep things so they don't have to do as much work.
Also on that frame, it could have been up of the top corners where it's darker. It has a dome look. It almost looks like that was winter honey. And then they brought in fresh new nectar down in the dome below. And that's why it's white, because that's brand new. And the other is older and it's sunk, the wax is sunk down.
And you can look at the stain of the color. So if you have to do honey judging, look at the cappings on this. You'll see that browner wax compared to this. This is that light yellow to white. So you can see the difference between the two. Find the queen. I want you to look away from your monitor, look back, and I want you to scan left, right, up, down. Tell me where the queen's at. Brad says mid-right. Right there she is. And pick up every frame. It's a skill. I mean, and don't feel bad. As a beginner, it takes you 45 minutes to do your first hive inspection. Might even take longer. Listen to the bees like Roger said. If all else, put it back together, come back later. If they get that queenless roar going on, they're going to get agitated. Always have your smoker lit as an exit plan. But just scan left, right, up, down, and then flip the frame. And then sometimes, no matter what, that queen is faster than your eyesight. As you flip the frame, she was at the bottom edge and she ran to the other side. Or maybe she dropped off. Or there's a lot of things. So you don't always have to see it. But if I looked at this frame, we see lots of open comb. What if I seen eggs in there? Do I have to find the queen? Absolutely not. If I see eggs that are standing up, I don't have to find that queen. But in this instant, you flipped it over, you found the queen. Good job.
Before you
go
flip
ahead, Roger.
that frame, I had another thing I had marked down. When you do find the queen on a frame, when I put it back in the hive, I want her out here in the middle. I don't want her on the edges or on the bottom, because when you go to put her in, if you have a bee space violation and she's on the bottom of that frame, she could get smashed. Same with the sides. There's not much leeway in the sides, and it's easy to, when you put that frame down, for it to move right and left, and you could pinch her. So if I know she's on that frame, I try to get her out here in the middle where there's more space for it before I put her in.
And just an aside to make it more complicated, you normally don't need to find the queen if you're determining whether you're queen right or not, unless you have a specific goal for that day in the bee yard, for instance, making splits or prevent swarm prevention, then you need to find your original queen.
So this next frame, what do you see on this frame? So you pulled it out. Let's just go from the left. So what do we see? Let's just go up to this point. So what do we see off to the left-hand side?
Looks wavy.
Okay. Yep, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, Dottie, nectar? No.
Open cells.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, Joseph. Open cells. So the queen was laying. So let's look at the center. What do we have? And tell me what type of bee would be underneath that.
Worker bees.
Yes. So the worker brood was here. She started to come out to the outside edge. There's still a lot of open comb or open cells for her to draw in. If you had the sun, I mean, this picture could also, there might be some pollen in the corners. I don't see much honey, but the bees are up here in the corner, so they could be putting some open nectar inside in the same way with the outside. So this is an early one where, as a beginner, or that colony starts to grow, you might see this. And then this outside edge could have eggs on this outside edge on each side, older larvae here, because you're starting to see some cells here that are either going to be open or emerging. So that frame is, you know that's what's going on.
If
Is
there's nothing in those cells, you might look at the hive as a whole and make sure that they have resources.
Yep.
You don't see pollen, you don't see much honey. We can't really tell what's in those other cells, but you want to make sure that if there's not honey and pollen on this frame around the brood, that there are other frames with resources.
The left side of that frame where it looks wavy. Now,
Mhm.
see drone cells.
No,
They make them bigger or not? No.
no.
They do.
We're-
They do.
The worker's going to be like 4.9. Drones are going to be 5.1 to 5.2.
Mhm.
It's going to be bigger this way, but when they're capped, the worker brood's going to be capped up that much. Drones are going to be capped up about a 1/4 inch taller.
Actually, I will have to agree with Joseph. In that lower left-hand
Mhm.
corner, those look like the size for drone
Yeah.
cells.
Yep.
Right in here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the bees don't read the books. So sometimes they just build wonky comb like that. Or there might have been a tear in the foundation there and they build wonky comb, where
And-
there's damage.
And remember when they draw this out, they draw little teardrops. So this could have been a teardrop that started, and then they started a teardrop here. And then when they built this extra nectar or house bees that were secreting wax, and they built this one. And also, this one, look at the other one on the other side of it that it touched. There might be a chunk of burr comb or something, because remember, whatever's on one side, that 3/8 gap is completing. So this would probably match the other one on the other side.
And that is in fact correct. But also, if there's damaged comb or near the edges, a lot of time preferentially, they'll prep it for drone comb.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And you can see where they stretch the cells out here, the upper or the
Mhm.
upper left. They started to stretch that. So this was probably hanging at one point, and they started to festoon and draw this to secure it.
Mhm.
And to the point on genies, if you open this up and seen that's all you had on 1 or 2 frames and there was no pollen or nectar in here, let's just say this is in August, and all of a sudden you have no resources at all, that would be the time to put on a little bit of pollen patty or start putting in 1-to-1 sugar water.
Yep.
Because you have to have those resources to raise those bees.
You see this a lot if there's been a lot of rain, where they've
Oh,
stayed in the
absolutely.
hive and eaten up all their resources.
Or this time of year when it's cold too.
Yep. Yep.
They limit the size because that's all they can keep warm.
Right.
All right. So 1, 2, 3. Find me the queen. Tell me where she's at. Dottie, left-hand side. Right there.
Mm.
And remember, these photos are pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Here, by the time next class comes up, my wife is helping me do a thing where I'm finding the frame of bees. We're putting it up, and I got a camera already set on the focus distance, and I'm finding frames and putting in, and the bees will be walking around. So by next class, we'll have a few of those, and then you'll see that as she's walking around and some things you're looking for. So for this one, we found the queen instantly. On A, what are these bees up top? All workers. Very good. And then we have down below, in these few cells on the corners, over here in B, bee bread. Or it's just bee, or
pollen.
it's just pollen.
Right.
Because I don't see the glimmer over here.
Right.
That's dried. Over here, I see the shimmy.
Shiny. Yep.
The shininess of it. So over here, I would say definitely bee bread. Over here, that capping, and you'll see that capping has a little bit of a dull coat to it.
Mm-hmm.
That is just straight pollen.
I usually see too that the bee bread is filled a little more, right
Yes.
to the top where the pollen is down a little bit.
Yep.
It's hard to tell.
Color is always the sheen of it. The pollen is always the indicator of me. Pollen will be matte colored.
Mhm.
Once they add the honey, you'll get a sheen to it. So
Mhm.
if you get the light really close on it, you can see the difference in sheen on these. Closer to the queen, that's
Right.
bee bread there. Underneath around bee, that looks like pollen because it's not the honey on it to ferment it.
Right. And for new people, bee bread is where they layer the pollen and the honey in layers like slices of bread. And what the honey does is prevent the pollen from spoiling. Pollen will mold in about a day and a half. And also it breaks down the hard coat on the pollen so that the bees can digest it. And then that becomes food for the young bees. And we have no idea why they call it bee bread.
No. So what's in the frame on this? You have a whole entire frame. And again, look at the waviness or the wonkiness of it.
Mm-hmm. And some burcomb there in the middle.
That's a good
Now.
one, Brad. You got communication holes in the bottom.
Yep.
So he got the bonus. But you'll see this where they put in some cross bridging between one frame of honey and the other. But this would be either in your top box or in a 10 frame box. It could be the 1 in 10 or in an 8 frame 1 in 8. So that's where they're storing it. They're storing it on the outside and above. And I would say, because it's so clean on the bottom, I would say this is probably on the left or right. What action should you take? So should you do anything with this honey or not? Let's say this is June. Brad says eat it. In June, I wouldn't go that far yet.
See how much more there is.
I would
was
eat
gonna
it.
say.
I'd eat it.
For June, absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember also, if you have a frame early season, you could uncap that, spin it out, as long as it was all capped, so you know it's all under the 18.1. Extract it. Don't extract it till it's absolutely dry. So it's gonna be a little bit wet. Put it right back on the bees. They'll clean it all up and they'll store it right back up. So there's some actions you can take with that.
Sometimes we think as beekeepers that, well, it's June, they got plenty of time, and we pull stuff. And if you pull too much, remember the bees have to have stores even in June. If it rains, if they don't have anything in their hives, like it's been here in Central Ohio for the last week, they're eating everything they've stored. So be careful what you pull. You got, in beekeeping, you have to do two things. You have to look at the whole. You have to look at the big picture, and then you have to look at the individual parts, and then put it all together and get an idea of the status of the whole hive.
If that frame of honey was on the side of the boxes, would you like maybe put another box on top and put it in a top box to
Okay.
encourage them to go up or something?
All right. If this was on the top box, and you said that to have a whole box of this.
No, no. If this was in the brood chamber on the right-hand side or something where it shouldn't be, would you put another box on top and maybe put that in it?
No.
No.
No? Okay.
It's okay if it's on the outside in a brood box.
Okay.
There's always some food in the brood box near the nest, sort of, you know.
Okay, so remember, to raise a baby bee, you have to have a cell of honey, a cell of water, a cell of pollen, and a cell of nectar. Right. Yeah, or bee bread, excuse me.
Right. So if that's in the top box, if that's in the second box or over the brood box, I mean, to me, that looks like it's from a super. Yep. Remember that, 7 to 10 or 8 to 10 rule. If you've got 8 of those in your top box, you better put another box or 2 on, especially if you're in the honey flow.
The only time I don't take this is, let's say, in the brood box, let's say the bottom brood box, and I got a frame of honey on the left and the right of it. So in a 10 frame, 1 in 10, or in an 8 frame, 1 in 8, I leave those frames of honey. Mm-hmm. So if anything happens, they still have honey to survive, to feed brood. I mean, if it inclement weather, raining, too windy, whatever happened, they have honey. The only time I would take it is like Jeannie said, if your next box up, you had 7 frames of capped honey, then if it was capped, I would lift that box up and put the empty box underneath it. So you're actually supering
under.
Yep, it's called under supering.
Yep. Because if this was all, let's just say, because the reason, if it's all capped, they're going to stay away from it. You don't look at the activity. You only have a few bees. They're cleaning things up, maintaining it, because they know it's up top. It's staying warm. It's never going to do anything. If you put a box on the top of that, they won't even cross the honey dome. They won't even go up to do it. But if you take that capped honey and lift it up, and put an empty drone comb or with foundation underneath it, so you're supering under, then they're going to go up and go, hey, all this honey was capped. We'll start filling it up. Just the opposite of this. Say you go up into that box and there were 7 or 8 frames of open nectar. Then you could super over, because they're all going to be up there capping and everything else. If there's tons and tons of it, I still super under. So there's a couple things you could do. But if it's all capped, always super under.
Jamie, there's a good question here. Where do they keep a cell of water? That's a great question. I don't know the answer.
They bring in water. There's actually water haulers, and they do a couple different things with it. They'll bring it in and feed it mouth to mouth to mouth, and then they mix that up, and they water down. So take this thick viscous honey, and they liquefy it down into say, Gatorade. So they'll actually do that in midgut. The other side of this is they'll bring in water to the front, say it gets 98, 99 degrees. They have to keep that colony within the 94, 95 degrees. So the house or the front bees will spit the water, the other bees will fan, and they're making like a swamp cooler. So they're making air conditioning. So if it's 98 degrees, 99 degrees, and it's so hot and humid, don't be in your bees, because you'll actually cook the hive, even though you think you're opening it up to give them more air. They've already controlled that. They're already in between the frames and everything, spitting water, spitting that moisture and expelling water to make a swamp cooler, to make an air conditioner. Same way if you move colonies. Never move a colony in 98 degrees and close it up a little bit, thinking you're going to get to there wherever you need to. If you have screen bottom boards, yes, pull the bottom screen board open a little bit, shim the top. I mean, I do it, always take a shim, or take a branch and put it on the top and pop the pop a little bit, or offset it a little bit and put a brick back on to let that excess heat pour out. So there's some different things you can do.
So to answer your question, Dottie, they don't store a lot of water in the hive in cells, but they're constantly using it. And that's where the big debate right now is in the wintertime, Do you allow a little ventilation, or do you let the hive sweat a little bit because they need that water to liquefy the honey so they can eat it easier?
Yeah, they're not storing water in a cell per se like they do with everything else. Let's say A, what do we have? And they're all clustered up. What could they be doing? Let's say that. Maybe a queen. Dottie, good idea.
Yep.
And a way to check that, if you see bees that are so clustered up, hold it up near your face and just blow right across it. The CO2 from your breath, they'll disperse. And a lot of the times you do see the queen down in there. Some of the times your eyes will scan over the top because her abdomen's down inside and you're only seeing the top of her thorax and her head, and the bees are clustered around her. It's like the queen in her court. Each time she lays an egg and comes back out, they're grooming her. They're cleaning her. You know, when she goes to the bathroom, I don't want to be that job, but somebody's eating it and taking it outside for her. She never leaves the colony. So that's a good thing. Let's jump down to B. And remember, if there's too thick of bees, what are you going to do? Blow across that frame a little bit. Capped worker brood. Excellent, Brad, Dottie. Tons and tons of capped brood. I see some old larvae that's getting ready to be capped. So basically, I have an entire frame. Drop down to C. What do we have here in the corner?
Yep.
Drone, exactly.
They look like Kix cereal, somebody says in my group.
I always call them 22 shells. You see that extra up dome. But along the bottom, you got a lot of burr comb. But remember, thinking ahead, and the best beekeepers I know think ahead a month to 2 months. What's going to happen to this colony if I have 5 frames of capped brood? Do they have enough room? Do they have enough resources? Do they have enough, everything else that's going on, and what the weather and everything else is going on? This is a good one. What do we see? Brad, eggs. And these are eggs that are just starting out. So I must say these are 48 hour, maybe 20, the end of their 24. They're not laying down yet, so they're not into the 36 hours. But right here, you see those nice eggs. I'll say this is a beginner. Black foundation if you can. If you decide to go with plastic, black foundation. And I'll tell you a quick short on this one. My wife has helped me for over 18 years in beekeeping. The 5th or 6th year, I always bought I wanted real wax, so I used to do the wires the whole 9 yards. She could never see eggs. One time I went to Dwight Wilson's. Dwight's like, "Hey, I got these extra frames. You want to buy them from me?" They had black foundation. I said, I don't want to be in black foundation. I took them home. My wife screams. I'm thinking, oh, what's wrong? I can see eggs. But that's why, because that black will really stick out and really make that egg stand out at you. So at this point, if I see the eggs, what do I know? What do I instantly know if I see eggs that are standing up or laying down at this condition?
Queen right.
Queen right. Perfect, Joseph. That your queen right, you got a good queen and she's laying. And this would also be a good time to see all the eggs in a nice pattern. Is she laying consistently across the frame? That could be in the arch. It could be one side or the other, or that football in the center. If I see nice, good, or sometimes you guys might see it as beginners, all this nice fresh wax and the whole entire frame is all eggs. Yeah, right there. Boom. She's had a great mating flight. She's laying good consistency. This girl's going to pour it on. This is what you're going to start seeing in end of May and June once you start getting this. So let's go A. What do we have up top? I tricked you, Brad. This is still worker cells. Nice and flat, right to the top of the foundation. See, as it's drawn comb. Here's the drawn comb. It's nice and level. Worker brood is just level. And it's got a convex cap. If you ever see cappings that are concave and sunken or pinholes, then you're talking about EFB, AFB, and other problems. So that's always capped up. But A is worker brood. And Brad, since I jumped the gun on this one, yes, those are queen cells. But I'm going to tell you this, they're not full queen cells yet. They're queen cups. Okay, so Dottie, same thing. A queen cup is just this beginning cell. So think of it, and the best way I can teach you, a queen cup is just like a coffee cup. All you have to do is look in it. But if you take that and tilt it up, put the sun over your shoulder, and look inside that cell, or that queen cup, then if you see royal jelly in the bottom, and a larvae that's either puddled or standing up, an egg standing up, now you have the beginnings of a queen cell that's going to get pulled out. So at this point, I mean, that could be a queen, a little bit of a queen cup, a little bit of a queen cell, but I would look inside of here first and know what's going on. If you do see eggs or larvae in royal jelly being pulled out, that's the time to catch the queen and make a split. Or open that box up completely. Don't instantly, if you see queen cells, and we'll see some here in a minute, don't instantly start tearing these down, because the bees are going to put them wherever. And depending on the breed of bees, you might see 2, you might find 15.
Talk about the icing on there, Jamie.
Yeah. And I always called it something else. Megan Milbreath probably has the best thing on this. Look at the icing. She calls it icing, like icing a cake. The white wax on the cell. That means they're actively working on it. I always just knew it by sight. I never really gave it a name. But Megan Milbreath says it's icing on the cake. It's icing on the cell. That means they're actively working on this. So they're getting ready to get in this production of drawing out a queen and starting to bulk up and then to run leave. Find the queen on this one. Close your eyes, open them up. Scan left, right, up, down. Left, right, up, down. Brad, top right. And this is a telltale sign. There's the queen in her court. There's the bees that are around the outside of her, cleaning her as she's walking over the top. So that's a good one. And we're giving you easy ones so far.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with this brood? So you're looking at this brood. Scan left, right, up, down. AFB. Well, let's let a couple others in here, Brad. Let's see what anybody else thinks. Different size, not in a pattern. That's a good thought.
Something's missing from those cells.
So I want you to note this. Think of this. I don't want you to have to worry about all the diseases. So I'm not knocking you, Brad, but don't worry about EFB or all the brood diseases. But I want you to remember white, wet, and creamy. If brood is white, that means there's no disease. If it's wet, we're not seeing pools of royal jelly in the bottom of this.
Right.
This is starting to scale down. And at the same point, just like Dottie said, they're all different. So she laid this one a long time ago, and then kind of got sporadic. This is also a telltale sign of where's the resources. This could be in August when the dearth is going on. Lorraine, yeah, protein and pollen. I don't see them being fed. If they're not being fed, that means pollen's not coming in the door. There's tons of healthy nurse bees to be able to turn on and do that, to give bee bread or to give nutrients. So in this condition, if this keeps up, they're going to go back and eat all these larvae, and they're going to start to shut down. So at this point, if I seen this, the larvae are still white, but as they start to die, they're going to start to turn brown. They're going to twist a little bit. Don't instantly go to AFB, because I don't see melted. And I will get you, by the next class, I will show you a video that Barb Bletcher and I did of AFB. And you will never, once you see it, you'll know. But this one, I wouldn't say AFB, because all the brood looks healthy, but the resources are drying up.
And Jamie, this is probably one of the most difficult pre-diagnostic frames that I think teaching beginners
Exactly.
is a problem. And that is determining when you have adequate nutrition coming into your hive. And poor nutrition predisposes larvae to EFB, but this and that lack of that pool of royal jelly,
Right.
those dry cells at the bottom, is one of the things that people need to be aware of when they're looking at their hives to prevent them going down the roll of eating all the larvae and suddenly they don't have any bees, baby bees or brood being there, especially when the dearth's coming on.
Yep.
And this is a hard frame to explain, but this is really important for beginners to understand.
Yep. And Brad had a good comment on these. He says, I thought they looked more like caramel colored. And that is because they're starting to dry up and die out.
Yep.
So you'll look in here, see how it's cracked? That means the royal jelly that was in there has dried
up,
and starting to peel away from the bottom. I will tell you this as an inspector. If you ever see these larvae that are twisted, they're brown, or the larvae is not there, and you see this puddle in the, let's say, in the bottom of the cell that's black, yellow, brown, that's melted. It doesn't even look like a larva. It looks like a puddle of white snot. I call it a booger on a stick. So if you take a piece of Timothy and you mix that up and you pull it out and it ropes out more than 1.5 inches, you could have EFB or AFB. So this is a pre-tell sign. So we're not saying to tear through. When I do an inspection, I want to see at least 2 healthy frames of brood. That means 4 sides or 2 full frames. And I want to see white, wet, and creamy. If I see white, wet, and creamy, so this one here is telling me resources are dying out. Like Brad shows, it's a little bit more of that caramel color. Things are inconsistent. And that queen, so what these workers are going to do, they're going to go back and eat all these larvae.
And this, prior to you seeing this frame, you should have caught that you had less royal jelly. And this is where I give protein, meaning a pollen patty substitute, and make sure they have the carb, the nectar or honey available.
Yeah.
Or feed.
And,
well, that's what I'm saying, but I feed both.
Yep.
And putting on a 1-to-1.
Now, Jamie, if they put those 2 things on immediately, can this frame be saved?
No, because they've already dried up to the point.
Okay, that's what I thought.
What you'll see, they'll clean all this out, and then the house bees will polish these cells back up. After that nectar and that 1-to-1 sugar water kicks in, then they'll start laying eggs again. But what they'll do, they'll shut down the queen, or every time she lays another egg, if she continues to lay, they're just going to eat the egg. As soon as she lays it, they'll go down the cell and just eat the egg.
And again, after this situation and they've eaten all this poor brood, you'll have your beginner or even somebody who's been a beekeeper for a couple years go in and say, and let's say we're talking August or September, I don't have a queen. I don't have any brood. But what they don't know is that this situation occurred and the workers shut the queen down because they didn't have resources.
And I'm going to take that one point beyond. If I seen this, if you instantly, like Jeannie said, instantly feed, like Lorene said too, pollen patties, not huge pollen, not a whole patty, pieces like a golf ball, and they gobble it up in 1 or 2 days, and you put on a 1-to-1 sugar water, and they start sucking it down like crazy, you could save this colony from not crashing, but they're going to have a decline. The other thing beyond this, if they clean all this out, you'll also see on the cap brood, they'll eat the capping off and they'll eat the heads of the drones and the workers because the vitellogelin in top of their head. So you'll see white pupae that are pulled out the front landing and people go, I got chalk brood. No. Look, do they have a head? No, their head's gone. That means the bees have popped into there, ate the vitellogelin out, ate their head off, and now the colony is in a deep decline.
And that's because they're hungry, right? Yes. And they're eating their own.
They're eating their own.
Pupa.
And at that point where they start eating their own brood, now the queen has quit laying. Now you go in there and you're looking for frames of brood, and there's no eggs, no larvae, no pupae, and all the cells are open. And people go, I want a queen. I need a queen. I'm going to make a comment like Roger always does. I probably screw myself out of tons and tons of sales, but I'm not going to unethically say, okay, I'll sell you a queen, because I'll give you a queen and all they're going to do is kill that queen. What I'm going to tell you to do is put on golf ball size of pollen patty, put 1-to-1 sugar water on the top, and all of a sudden, give me a call within 4 to 5 days. All of a sudden, your queen will start laying again, and people go, oh, I see eggs now.
Yeah.
They shut the queen down.
And again, Jamie, I've made people angry at me that I question that they're not queen right. But again, this is why out of all these frames, this is such a major frame for being able to read the brood and that royal jelly to help prevent some of the problems that many a beekeeper, and not just pure beginners, but again, several years under their belt, and they do not understand this nutrition frame.
And I will say this to Randy Oliver's side of this, and this is where I really picked up as being a good beekeeper myself: wet brood and dry brood. Wet brood is that, that's why I say white, wet, and creamy. Are they swimming in Olympic-sized pools of royal jelly, or is it like a little spit in the bottom of a pool? Dry brood is just what you're seeing here. The resources are gone. They got that little spit of royal jelly, and so let's say this: are you going to have healthy bees even if some of them survived? No, they're not going to fully mature because they weren't fed the entire time. So it's a really good, if you learn frame identification, you'll be ahead of the ball game. So here's what we don't want to see. So I'm going to jump ahead on this because we're running behind a little bit. Remember, there's the drone comb, and that capping, that convex capping, is right on top.
Not
so
drone.
Nice worker brood.
Yeah, worker brood.
B, and I want you to understand B. So what do we have? You pulled this open, you haven't checked your bees in probably, say 14 days, about 2 weeks. Something happened in the family, you worked, you neglected them, let's say good or positive. So what do I have in B? Nobody's going to answer me. Come on.
Wake up, folks.
All right, closed-celled emerging. Yes, there's some bees emerging. Good eye on that one. Capped queen cells, absolutely. At this point, if it's capped, I want you to go and buy or go to a supermarket and get a raw peanut. Look at the gnarls of wax all over the outside of this peanut. It was capped on day 10. The bees will start to thin the tip of this out on day 14. So I don't know when this is, but I know it's between day 10 and day 14. That means you haven't checked your bees in this whole entire time. Guaranteed the old queen is gone. Guaranteed half of your bees are gone. Half your workforce is gone. And then what am I going to do at this point? And here's the kicker. I'm going to pick, if this is the only 3 queen cells I find, and the bees aren't going to put them all together for you to find real easy. They might find one on another frame, one on the outside, one on an end. They might eat the wax out of a frame and put it inside, recess it back inside of it. But let's just say for this, you had a 5-frame nuke, or this is your colony. You pulled it up, you found these 3 cells. What you could do, and this is getting a little advanced, each one of these is a nice long. I don't want a queen cell that looks like this, the tip of my finger. I want them like the fat of my thumb. The bigger, the longer, that means she's got a thick or a wide thorax, she's got a long abdomen, and she's been fed tons of royal jelly. So the better, the better. The bigger, the better. You could actually take a knife, and I want you to, even if you find this, try it. And I'm going to cut right here between these two and cut a gigantic circle around this, and do not touch that cell. And then make another split. Take a frame of brood, take a frame of honey, take a frame of pollen, and put it in a nuke box and see if you can raise that queen.
And stick that on one of the frames.
Yes, and stick
with a
this,
pin, with a tack.
Yep, so up here in this dead zone that you cut out, so you cut it way out around, push your finger into the wax into another frame. But keep the orientation. Don't take that and flip it or move it or shake it. I'm going to take it and that same thing, and I'm going to push it into the frame by another drawn comb or with brood in the corners. I'm going to shove that in, and I'm going to make a split. Let these two queens, that you got this one on the bottom right, let those two queens fight it out. You have an insurance policy. If one comes out first, she just eats the cell out of the side and kills the other queen off. If they emerge at the same time and they'll beep, they'll beep,
Fight.
beep, 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 and they're locating each other. If they fight, two of them, they'll fight to the death. One dies, she goes out and wins. But it's not a guaranteed, because she'll have to take a mating flight. So in this, you've already lost your old queen, lost half the workforce. Do not tear these off. And put these in between a frame. When you put it back together, leave a little bit of gap. Because if you shove that up in between and it crushes that cell a little bit, they'll just eat them and then you're out all your queens. Lorene, I use queen piping to help find virgin. Oh, absolutely. Virgin queens, if there's multiples, they run around. So in this, because this looks like a flap, it looks hollow underneath.
Yep.
You could easily cut that out and then use it into another. If you're really good and you really want to try it, take an X-Acto blade and cut strips up, and then you can make 3 splits if you wanted. If one failed, then you just combine the other 2 back up. But if you notice the tip, so here we're looking at the tip, this hill still has that gnarly wax on it. On day 14, they're going to start to chew all that excess wax out, and there's the cocoon of the queen. That's when she's going to get ready to emerge within 2 days. If you start to see a mandible, and you see this little mandible of the queen starting to chew, and she's chewing a little trap door, that means you're going to be a mother or a father really quickly, or a grandparent, depending on which way you want to play it. If you see that cell and it's got a complete circle chewed out, and there's a little trap door hanging, put it completely back together. That means you got a virgin queen running around. She has to spread her QMP or her queen mandible pheromone in this colony as fast as she can to get the workforce to like her. Put that colony back and make on your notes. Take a Chinese grease pencil on the top. Do not touch for 2 weeks, because she's got to run around. She's got to sexually mature 7 to 10 days. She's got to take a mating flight 7 to 10 days and then come back and lay. So you got about almost a month. So if you see the trap door open and it's hanging or it's completely chewed off, put it back together and then turn around and wish for the best. And then after 2 weeks, you're going to look for eggs that are standing up. Identify and evaluate. We got tons and tons of bees. Tons and tons of cat brood. Good, healthy frame, Brad. Absolutely. It's a good, healthy frame. They're over here keeping the heater holes. This could be early spring a little bit or late fall. But they're turning and they're really pouring it on. Everything really looks good. No sunken cappings, no pinholes. And I got tons of bees on it. Very good. Again, what do we see in this? Tell me what's in the cells. You got a 50-50 possibility on this. Honey or nectar? I'll even break it down for you, make it easy. Dottie, nectar. Yep. Brad, nectar. Yes. You agree, Joseph? That is all open nectar. And depending, where should nectar be? All in the top or off to the sides? It should never be in that brood area.
Unless it's nectar, in the dome or in the rainbow.
Yes. In the honey dome in the top, if it's anything from there up or along the sides, 1 and 2, 8 and 9, 8, 9, 10, depending on if you have 8 frame or 10 frame, it should never be in the brood area. If you see nectar backfilling into the brood area, you're Tirani, you're in trouble. You're behind the 8 ball. What do we see? And we're still seeing quite a bit of colors. The best color I like is dead nettle. Bee bread. Brad, go back 1 stage from bee bread. Look at the dull color on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Pollen,
yep,
very good.
Pollen. Mm-hmm.
It's that dull color. I don't see the shininess. And look around. You might have a little bit up in the corners, but remember that sheen of bee bread. So that means they pumped it in here. They put the individual BBs of pollen. They took their head and they packed it up like a trash compactor. And everything's ready to go. Good job. What do we see here? And I want you to look at the entire thing before you say something. Look at all these eggs. Because I see something as an inspector.
Should there be bees on them?
Should absolutely be bees on them.
Hmm.
So down below, we have eggs. As I'm scanning up, look at the scale in the bottom.
Yep.
Where the bees didn't clean it out. Look up here. We have what? Young larvae, and they're not swimming in pools of royal jelly. And we have a dead scale here. Dead scale here. So this is what we talked about in the last one. Brad, dried out, yes. Jody, bee larvae with disease. Not so much disease. Remember, let's go back to the 3 rule. Wet. So we have eggs. They all look white. Wet. Nothing looks wet. I mean, right here, let's go to this one. A little bit of dried royal jelly in this. Wet, white, and creamy. I see none of that. This is starting to dry. This is starting to die. That's starting to die. That's got scale. So I'm going to say this is a nutrition problem. This is the next step that we remember when I said as they start to shut down, the queen is still doing what? Look at all these eggs.
Dying. Yep.
The queen's trying to outlay the disease, or not disease, but outlay the condition. The condition is resources are shutting down. She just doesn't know it yet. And they're not communicating to her. So she's laying these eggs trying to compete. They didn't clean out the cells real well. And I got larvae in the top that are turning brown, getting scaly. So this 1-to-1 sugar water, pollen patty instantly. And you might be able to get this back out. Check it in a week. If the conditions worsen, then it could be AFB or not, or it could be on this one, I'm going to say EFB. But EFB is that where the larvae, it starts to get into the larval stage, like up here in the corners. It has to be in the mid, it's a mid gut disease. So as the larvae starts to grow, that disease blows them up and they melt they melt above the wax. Here's the difference between the two.
Oh.
If you have that larvae that's melted in, let's say this one in the middle, even though it's a little bit white left, if you can take a toothpick and you can pop that dried cell and it pops off the wax, does not distort the wax, but it pops off. So it's just like a little scab. It pops right off. EFB, if it is. If it's melted into it and you go to pick it and the wax tears off with it, AFB. AFB melts into the wax. So there's the big two that you always see. But this is a dearth. This is a dearth coming on, and it's getting away from the bees. What do you see? In this one, you pull the frame up in the top box. This would be a 2-box condition. You pull the top box up, and you got all these what? What do I have between the frames? Browning bees between. Growing bees between.
Yeah.
What kind of bees?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I see all the time, and people go, I got wax moth and I have this.
Drone.
Brad,
Yes.
drones. Excellent. And that's where it is. She's got that extra cell, that 1/2-inch gap, and then they turn on, because remember, between the manufacturers, if you buy a little bit from Dayton, a little bit from Man Lake, a little bit from Brushy, between the boxes, that gap might not be that perfect 3/8. It might be a 1/2 inch, might be 3/4. If you built your own boxes, did you hold that tolerance? And you'll see this as they ran out of room, and the bees said, hey, we got this extra gap between. You'll start seeing all these.
What do you call the wax there? What's that called?
Yeah, what do you call the wax in between here?
Yep.
Burr comb. Excellent.
Burr comb, bridge comb.
And once you tear these open, just push the larvae off to the side. The bees will eat them, and that's protein for them. And then you can take your smoker, hit them, don't dose them. 1 or 2 puffs on the tops. Take your hive tool, scrape off the top.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's all honey. I'll just jump on that one. So let's go to the pop quiz. Number 1. What do you see?
Egg,
Eggs. Very good. Number 2.
queen cells.
Queen cells. And they're capped.
Oh, cat, sorry.
Okay. And it's all right. But remember, they're capped. If they're still open, you know, they haven't. So that's not up to day 10 yet. Number 3.
Capped honey.
Capped honey. Very good. Number 4. Miss Bumblebutt herself, the queen.
Yes, the queen.
Number 5.
Drones.
That's drones.
And it's
And you
larva.
can also find, if the boxes are kind of wonky and there's different spacing, you can find that there's worker cells in between there too. But most of the time it'll be drones. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're nice, white, wet, boom, shove them down, the bees lead them up. And number 6. Worker brood. Excellent, guys. Every one of them. Excellent job. And a thing to do, if you can do this yourself, if you have to try and take a grease pencil on top, I'm taking this trick right from Dwight Wilson, who's kept bees for 60 plus years. In your head, did you see the thing? So put it in your head. Did you see pollen? Did you see nectar? Did you see white wet brood? Did you see the queen or proof of egg standing up? So a sense, you're taking a quick survey. Did you have all those things in there that you need to have a healthy colony? If you know you had good brood and egg standing up, you got a good quality queen. You seen pollen around the ring of the brood or an entire frame of it. You got resources. You had open nectar or honey. And that's why I like to keep honey on the outside, a cap brood, and let them have it. So if they need to liquefy it back down, they can do that. And then, you know, I seen white wet brood, so I know I have no disease. And like that, if you start to see little things of it, if you're in your bees every week, week and a half, you can find disease or problems when it's a little problem than it is waiting for 4 weeks and then I as an inspector come out and look at your colony and go, when's the last time you were in there? And people, I don't think they do it purposely. They do it because they're, you know, kind of afraid or kind of, you know, embarrassed. But they'll tell me, oh, I was just in it last week. When it takes 2 hive tools, when it takes me 2 hive tools to shove in and I'm bending the hive tools, I'm not going to ever say a liar, but I'm just going to say, when's the last time? I'm going to ask you again. And then I get the truth. Well, it's been 3 weeks. It's been 2 months. But then you open it up and you find the whole thing with wax moth or the whole thing overrun with hive beetle. Or you'll find no brood or the entire colony absconded. So being in your bees, you know, I understand that there's family things, issues, there's work issues, there's everything else. But try to stay on top of it. To do your alcohol wash every month at the same time when you pay your bills. But remembering, we're teaching you this stuff so it doesn't get out of hand. And if you do, you can instantly look at the frame and go, that's an issue or that's a problem. And here's what I need to do. And if it's outside of your realm, you know, you got your mentors, you got your bee officers. Attend a club. Go to those meetings and ask other people that are having 1 and 2 hives. Ask a question. Don't be afraid. Me, I've traveled all over Ohio. I'm getting ready to go to Michigan again to do the big stuff. The worst thing I do is I get up and I say, is there any questions? And everybody goes, no. And the whole audience is nice and quiet. And as soon as I walk off the stage, I get bombarded by 25 to 50 people that are, oh, I got a question. I don't take that as an insult, but remember, when you're asking that question, there was probably 10 people in the audience that also wanted to ask that question, but were afraid to. So don't be afraid to raise your hand, speak up, and say, hey, you know, I have a condition or I see this. So I'll wrap that up. Mr. Roger, I'll let you take it back over.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll reiterate that as Jamie was to a meeting, the Maumee Valley Beekeepers meeting, and he left without saying goodbye to me because I was swamped with people asking questions. And he was hungry. So yeah, it happens at every meeting. So yeah, raise your hand because there's always people. We're after 12 o'clock, so we're going to wrap this up. There will be an extra video on the YouTube channel It's I'm making a video of package versus a nuke. I explain the package I received through the U.S. Postal Service. I talk about a lot of things. You know, I found the eggs. I put the hive back together, just like we talked about. I don't need to see the queen. I found eggs in here. She's laying. We put her back together. I pulled the frame of honey up to encourage them, or sugar water nectar. I pulled that up in the last video. So it goes for 45 minutes, and we're not going to watch that today. I wanted to say thank you to Jamie Walters, Kelly Moores, Carol Kralik, Lorraine Keel, and Jeannie Sham, all the committee members that were online today and did videos and helped us out with this. It's a team effort here. I appreciate it. Thank you all for attending. If anybody has any questions before we leave, feel free, unmute yourself, ask. Shoot them out there. We're glad to, it's why we're here. So I appreciate the kind words of thanks. So
absolutely.
It's been another great day. Hopefully you all have bees by next month, and we'll have another class on June, the first Saturday in June, whenever that is. I don't have my calendar right in front of me.
And please
Thanks,
remember,
everybody.
we want you guys to be successful.
Yep. There's a lot.
One question: what were the segments called on those bees again? The lines in the different segments of the abdomen.
Targa.
What were they?
Targa.
Targa.
Targa. Okay, thanks. That's a new word on me.
Mm-hmm.
You call them segments. Most of us just call them segments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks again.
You're
Very
welcome.
informative. Always learn
Thank
something
you.
new.
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yep. You
All right,
always will.
bye-bye.
I got this package, a long story. I'm not gonna bore you with it. I haven't bought a package in 20 years. So this was something new. Brand new beekeeper who wasn't ready for the bees, didn't have his equipment ready, gave it to me. So this is gonna work out really great in this experiment. I'm gonna experiment with a package of bees and a nuke of bees made on the same day, see what happens. But first off, I want to explain this package out a little bit. This person, brand new beekeeper, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, ordered his bees. They were shipped from Georgia through the post office from Mountain Sweet Honey Company. They were sent on Sunday, April 17th. They arrived on Wednesday in Delta, Ohio. Kind of surprising. The postmaster told me that they were shipped the slowest rate possible, the cheapest way. In my opinion, I would never ever send bees through the mail to be received. There are some dead bees in this package. That's not too uncommon. And in fact, coming through the mail, I was pleasantly surprised that half the bees weren't dead. I spritzed some sugar water on them yesterday. Today's Thursday now. Yesterday was a very cold, windy day. Today's warmer and windy. Since there are no bees clustered on this can, I'm assuming the can's out of sugar already. They pretty revved up. They seem pretty happy. Here's the shipping label. Came post office. I do not see the 2 loose bees that were on the outside of this package. I don't know if they escaped on the way from Georgia to Ohio, or if they rode on the outside of the package all the way from Georgia. But since there was 2 loose bees on this package, the lady working the counter would not touch the package, and the postmaster had to come out from his office to retrieve this package because they were scared to death of it. It does look in good shape. It was sitting upright. I'm surprised how much bee fecal matter are sitting all over this package. It does have a queen certificate or an apiary health certificate from the state of Georgia. So I'm gonna spritz some sugar water on them here. I always like spritzing sugar water on them before I start to shake a package out. To spritz sugar water on the bees, all I do is mix up some 1-to-1 sugar water, put it in a clean, new, all-purpose spray bottle, and just squirt some sugar water on them. Right through the screen. You can see some of the sugars running down. Both sides of the screen. They definitely didn't get it excited as they did yesterday. So I think yesterday they were pretty hungry when I squirted sugar water on them. So they're kind of chilling. They've been outside here for a little bit. It's about 50 degrees this morning. Okay, I got my bricks out here. I like to level my bricks. These bricks are my hive stand. I prefer using bricks. They're cheap, easy to use. Here's for the package, and my nuke's gonna go right here. I got my bottom boards out here. I'm gonna put my bees to start them in a 4-frame nuke box to get them started. They can hold the heat a little better. It's April 21st. It's supposed to be 70 degrees today. 80 over the weekend. Mid next week, highs of 45. Got lids and inner covers. So I'm all ready. I also like to have this back brick just a hair high, so if any water pools in, it can escape out the front and not pool in the hive. Before I even start pouring my bees into my box, I want to make sure I got everything. I got my sugar water, I got a little pollen patty to feed them, got my jacket on, hive tool, smoker lit in case we need it. Hopefully we don't. And we'll get started here. Spritzing with sugar water again. Spritzing them with sugar water works just about as good as smoke. I'm gonna dampen them up just a little bit again. They're busy feeding each other. They act like they're hungry. And that kind of keeps them distracted while I pour them out. I'm also going to spritz some sugar water on these empty frames. I got 2 frames in this 4-frame box. That way most of the bees will drop down in. Sugar water does not hurt anything. They're going to be so busy licking each other and licking all this sugar water up off the wood, off these frames. They won't even want to leave. We want this to make it a pleasant home for them. I also have my entrance reducer in. This is less than 2 fingers, probably about an inch opening, where they can control their heat better. I'm going to show you what's going on inside though. Let me grab the camera. Look at the bees instantly sucking up that sugar water that's on those frames. So I'm going to put my other 2 frames in. Sure all the bees move away. My queen over here, I'm going to put her right in the middle. I want this queen opening where the screen is most visible to the bees, so the bees will cluster up on her and keep her warm since it's going to be cold. So it goes down in, pull this strap over here, pinch that queen cage right in there. Move this over. There, now she won't fall down, get trapped down below. Got some bees flying around. I gotta get these bees off the edge, so I'm just gonna brush them with my finger. more spritzing on them. Not gonna hurt anything. So as long as it's not cold out, you don't want to do this on a really cold day. Also blowing on the bees gets them to move. I'm gonna wiggle the box back and forth, push them down in. I got my second hive body on. I'm gonna put this feeder in here. I'm gonna put this pollen patty in. I'm gonna rip it into 2 little pieces. I'll make sure this airlock's all out to the side. Drop my feeder in here to protect them. Got my feeder in. Put my inner cover on. Put the lid on. And you can see quite a few girls out here fanning. They're fanning their smell, so all these bees that are flying around know where the home is. I got a new home, a little different than what they were used to. Got some bees that have gathered up on the box because it still smells like the old, you know, where they've been for the last 3-4 days. I'm gonna knock some of these off right here in front. And that's how you install a package. Day 2 of the package nuke experiment. I know everybody always asks how long it takes for bees to drink the nectar or the sugar water that you give them. So we'll take a look here. See down into the bees. See my tub's about half gone. It wasn't clear full to start with. You can see some bees drinking. Our pollen patty's still there. Cluster of bees. So we're looking good on day 2. I'm getting ready to install my nuke into my nuke box next to the package for this experiment. I got my smoker lit. Of course, it's really smoking right now. Got a piece of pollen patty with me. I got a nuke here that a lot of people wonder, you know, they think experienced beekeepers never make mistakes, but we do. I was making this nuke up to sell to another beekeeper. I painted the queen. I guess I'm getting old with the shakes. I painted her head along with her thorax. I will not sell that queen. So the queen's still in here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna catch her. I'm gonna put her in a queen cage. They're in my pocket. And I'm gonna put her back in the original hive she was in. That way, this is gonna be a queenless hive, and we'll put a boughten queen in there this afternoon. So I'm gonna start. We got smoke drifting around. I also have my sugar water that works good. And we're gonna find the queen. There's 3 frames of brood in here, some honey. This is only a 4-frame box, so the second frame's already got 4 empty frames, and I'm gonna put a frame of honey up there. And everybody's clustered down. It is about 10:30 in the morning. It's a little chilly today. I'm gonna put these in the same order they were in this nuke box. There's honey on the outside. Frame of honey with bees. Capped honey and open honey for their food. That's the way a nuke should be. We got a frame of brood here with a lot of bees on it. Honey in the corners. Capped brood. I got some drone brood down here on the bottom. It is spring. They want to raise babies. There's a little bit of open brood in here. Inspect the other side, cat brood. I see some larvae, different sizes of larvae. In a nuke, you want eggs, small larvae, large larvae, all stages. I see baby bees. They're gonna go in here to stay warm. I do not see the queen on that frame. Ease it over. Again, another frame of brood. I do not see the queen. And the queen's on this frame. There's lots of open brood, a little bit of cat brood, a drone. Queen's on this side. You can see my horrible paint job. Her thorax, she's got paint on her eyes, on her antenna. So far they haven't killed her, but I'm not going to take that chance to sell to somebody, so I'm going to catch her, put her in my pocket, and we're going to move her back to her original hive. So working one-handed sometimes is difficult, so you need to hopefully I can balance everything here. I'm going to catch her by her wings and thorax, stick her head first into a queen cage. Come on, girl, walk in. There she goes. I'm gonna pick a couple worker bees, put in here too. And then I got some queen candy I'm gonna cork this off with. Another one. That one doesn't want to go in. So I got my queen in there. I'm going to put my brood in here. I'm going to spin this around. It's got cat brood. There's my first 4 frames. Got queen candy here. It's been in the refrigerator, so it's probably a little on the hard side, but this queen candy's kind of a homemade fondant. So more or less plug her off. There is a little food in there. I'm gonna put them in my shirt pocket since it's cool out here, keep her warm. Chest pocket works great for that. She's in there. All right, I'm gonna put my second box on. I got empty frames in here already. All the girls are going down. They don't know their queen's missing yet. I got this frame with honey again. I'm gonna put this up above. If this was a 5-frame box, I would have put it on the outside. So they're gonna go in there, center them up. My piece of pollen patty, put it on top here. Could have put it down below, but I already have everything together. I think I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna put this close to the brood. Of course, I'm going to be putting a queen in here this afternoon, so everything can get moved again. There's a few bees in my box, kind of like we do with the package. Dump them out. Last one by hand. Put my sugar feeder up on top since they got to draw this wax out. We're gonna need feed. Today's a cloudy day, a high of 56. Tomorrow it's supposed to be 80. Good old Ohio weather. Put my Box here on to protect my sugar water. Inner cover, lid, and we're good to go. We'll be back this afternoon. I'm going to put a queen in here, and I think I'm going to let that queen out. Okay, it's Saturday now. We made this nuke up on Friday. We're going to put the queen in. Here's our queen in a cage. And on our package, we're going to pull the queen out. So we'll get started here. I'm going to release this queen from this package. Hive. A few bees on the inner cover. I'm going to lift this off just to make it easy. You can see we put this out on Thursday. It's now Saturday. And almost all the sugar water's gone. So in a day and a half, 2 days, they've gone through that sugar water. Yeah. Open this up. Queen out. See the bees festooning on here. She's still alive. The workers are alive. You can see the worker bees on here. We're just gonna brush them. They're not fighting. So I think she's ready to be released. She's been in here either from Sunday or Monday. I'm not sure since I wasn't in charge of this package. I'm gonna lay her. Get my pocket knife out here. Let's see, all the bees get right on her. They seem to like her. They're starting to draw some foundation. They got sugar water, since I'm feeding them sugar water. The weather's been really crummy. They're starting to draw that. And they got the backside started to draw. This looks beautiful. So as soon as she's ready to lay, they got some wax drawn. She's gonna be ready to lay eggs as soon as she gets out and gets primed back up. After she's quit laying eggs for a few days, sometimes it takes a little bit. And I'm just gonna pull this cork out of the cork end, and I'm gonna let the queen walk out. A worker bee came out. Another worker bee. Probably gonna have some worker bees walk in. She's still walking around. Here she comes. Oh, she turned around. Got worker bees going in. They want to get to her. They like her. Another worker bee in. That one backed out. I'm going to try to keep these worker bees from going in. Still a worker bee in there with the queen. Oh, there she is. She's right here on the back of the cage. It's not a huge queen. She's walking on the cage. I'm going to let her walk right off the cage, maybe. Making another loop around. And she walked right there and down between the frame. The other girls checking her out. This cage still has quite a bit of her pheromones on it. You can see the bees think she's still there. What I like to do is keep this queen cage with her pheromones in here, in the hive with the bees until they get used to it. So I'm just going to slide this cage in the bottom of the hive. Yes, it will probably confuse the bees a little bit. Got my pollen patty still here. I'm gonna push these together just a little bit now that the queen is out. So I got proper bee space here. I brought some more sugar water out to fill my feeder. Got a few bees left here. The only drawback about this feeder is you got to empty it before you can refill it. And you almost always get some swimmers. I got these on the bottom here. Tonight I'm gonna have to make some more sugar water up. So that's about half full. Yesterday we had a high of I think 52, pretty chilly. Today's supposed to be 80, so I'm sure they're gonna drink this sugar water up. I've got some loose bees here. I'm gonna brush these off so they go back in the hive or fly or do something. This hive's looking very good. So far, so good. Put this back on. Make sure I don't smash any bees. Of course, I had to put 1 drop of sugar water there. Inner cover. Lid. And I'm good to go. And that's it. You can see some of these bees coming in with pollen. Even though they're not even raising baby bees, they're bringing in pollen. They're still scenting the queen. Looks good. All right, I got my boughten queen from California. I like Russian carnelian queens, either or. This is a mix. She came from California. We're gonna put her in this nuke. She was shipped in a box by herself in the cage with worker bees. She's been sitting out here and some of the worker bees are attracted to her. That's why there's so many bees on here. So we're gonna try to keep some of these worker bees with her. We're gonna put her in this nuke. Okay, we installed this yesterday. Got my inner cover. Got this extra box on here. Still loose. There are a few bees up here, but not a lot. You can see it around the sugar water. It's still almost full. They do have some honey in here, and I guess it goes to prove that they like honey better than sugar water. We're going to take this box off. This has got the frame of honey in it. I'm going to set this off to the side on top of this other empty box. I know you can't see it. We're going to spread these frames apart just a little bit. We took the queen out yesterday, so I know she's queenless. There's a gap in here. And I'm going to place the queen sideways so they can get to all the pheromone around here. It's going to be butted up on the frame up above where there's no ventilation or scent. I'm going to slide this down in. I'm going to give it a little turn. And it's wedged in the foundation. Turn my cap. And now I got my queen in there. I put a plastic cap on this JZBZ cage so they can't chew through. I want several days with her in here before I release her. Probably 3 or 4. So next week someday I will release that queen. Put everything back together. Almost forgot to put the sugar water back on. Sugar water here. Keep any other worker bees away. Inner cover and lid. And now we got our queen in our nuke, and in about 3 or 4 days we'll release her. Today's April 28th, a Thursday. My queen's been in here since Saturday. She should have come out yesterday or so. The weather in Ohio hasn't always cooperated. It's only 50 out today. Yesterday was 50, but it's time to release the queen. Hopefully she's still alive. We're gonna go in this hive and let the queen out. So the sugar water I fed on Saturday on the package was gone by Sunday afternoon. So weather depends. Over the weekend it was in the 80s, very warm. Now the sugar water's going down a lot slower. This is just about, well, it's still full. Right here's the level. I put this on Tuesday, so they're hardly taking any of it. It's been cold. Bees are probably all clustered around the queen down here. I'm not gonna dilly-dally a lot here. These here. A little bit of pollen sub left. Got a little cross combing going on because we got bee space violation here. They're just trying to fill things up. Move my frames over just a hair. Pull this queen out. Queen's still walking around. See, the bees are on here. They're nonchalant. They don't really care about her. I'm gonna open this up and let her walk on out. Right there. I'm sure she's not gonna, there she comes. Walked right out. Right down by those bees. They didn't even see her go out. I'm gonna slide these frames back together. That's all we're gonna do. She's released. The bad thing about judging these queens packages, when you receive a package, this queen's already been laying in my situations at least 2 weeks. I want cat brood in my hive before I sell it to anybody from the queen. So pollen back here, pollen sub. Put this box back on. I think there's room here. I like to leave this queen cage in the hive for the simple fact it's got her smells on it. I'll let them continue to enjoy her pheromones. So that's in there. Put the feeder back on top. Put the box around it so nobody can steal it. And we're done for today. My lid on. Over here we'll check the sugar water. And they still have some. This package is taking the sugar water faster than the nuke is, but the nuke does have a frame of honey in it, and the sugar water is a little further from them, so everything's looking good. Okay, today's May 4th, Wednesday. I released this queen about, I think last Thursday, so she's been out for 6 days. We're gonna check to see if she's laying eggs. We're gonna check the package hive, see if that queen's laying eggs. I brought some extra frames out here. I know the package needs some more frames. They're all drawn out. I've been feeding sugar water whenever they need it. So we're gonna fill the sugar water and we're gonna check these bees. I got my smoker going back here. I also had to put a new bottom board on the package as my old bottom board's delaminating. So I need to replace that. Got some pollen patty back here, so we're gonna get started. Today's not the greatest day to check bees. It's only like 55 degrees. It's cloudy. I'd much rather have 70 and sunny, but this is Ohio. It rained all day yesterday. It's going to rain again Friday. Tomorrow's not much better, so it's time to do this. This frame's all drawn out and full of nectar. You can see the shiny nectar in here. Sugar water nectar, basically. This side's drawn out better than the back, so I'm going to flip this around. I'll probably even raise it up one to encourage the bees to work up. This is what we wanted to see. So I got capped brood, dome of honey, honey sugar water. I got some eggs in here, some open larvae. And on this side, pretty much the same thing. Not quite as much capped brood, a lot of open brood. They got this dome going from the edge of the frame to the edge of the frame, just the top little bit of dome. Oh, and there's our queen walking right here. So we're going to gently put her back. Everything looks good. I've seen what I need to see. No use going any further. Gently put them back. I got my new box frames right here. Of course, I got to put a new bottom board on. So I'm gonna pop this up. This here. Queen cage is still in here. I always like putting the queen cage in there so they can smell the queen for a couple more extra days. It's full of, I always think those queen cages are full of pheromones. We put that there. I'm gonna pull one of these frames out. I'm gonna put this outside frame with primarily nectar in it up into the second box in the middle. They have no eggs to keep warm, but it's going to encourage them to work up. Put this empty frame right here. This on top. It's cold. I don't want to keep this open any longer than I have to. Space my frames. Put a couple pieces of pollen patty up here for them. I put little pieces in, not very big. Rip off a piece. I put 2 pieces in. Rip the extra paper off. Put that there. I'm gonna refill my sugar water. And accidents happen, as in I spilled some, put 4 bees in there. Middle, put my protection around. And that hive's done. Now I know this other hive is a little bit slower. It's not drawing as fast. First they were queenless. They didn't have an active queen till last week. So see what's going on here. They've been really slow on taking the sugar water too. They haven't drawn any wax out up here. They do have some honey that they've been working on. This is a frame of honey that came with the nuke. Lots of bees down below. Find a corner that I can get my hive tool in. Go. That there. And like the other hive, they have filled, they've stored their nectar. It's all in this frame here. It's the front side was full, the back side's about half full, a little bit of honey. So they got their food down there. I'm gonna prop this frame up along the side here. Take another frame off. These are a little excited today. Move this frame over. I'm looking for eggs or real small larvae. This frame has still got hatching brood on it on both sides. I don't see my queen. Lots of drone material down at the bottom, a little extra drawing going on. When you buy a nuke, a lot of times, you know, you're getting frames, and they, especially this time of year, they want to build out. I don't see any queen cells, like they were trying to raise their own queen. More cat brood. Haven't seen the queen yet. Wish the light was better, but I think I see eggs. I definitely see eggs. So I got eggs in here. There's eggs in this open between the cat brood. Definitely eggs. Since I know the queen's laying eggs, there's no use bothering these bees any more than you have to. I got eggs, so she's been laying for at least the last couple days. I'm gonna put this frame back just the way it was. The honey next to them. Ease it down in so you don't squish any bees. That's in. I'm gonna put a piece of pollen patty right there with that other frame sitting on top of it. Two little pieces. They'll sit there. I'm gonna put this other 4 frames with that honey. There. Feeder back on. Take the queen cage away. Protection on. The other bees in this apiary can't get to them. Put my lid on. And I'm done with my inspection. I want to make an addition to the video. When I was taking the can out of the package, it's through a fast forward, you didn't see too much of it. I inadvertently punctured a hole in the can with my hive tool. I've gotten some reports from other beekeepers that say that some of these cans in packages, the holes aren't big enough for the bees to get the sugar water out of. And I found this to be very true. I poked this hole in it, and the sugar water would not drain out of this hole here. Even with a small ventilation hole, it should have burped through here. I ended up taking a small nail, increasing the hole size to drain my can. So this can be a problem with packaged bees. So I would very much make sure that if you can't get your package dumped into your hive on the day it arrives, to make sure you spritz some sugar water on them so they have feed. Looking in hindsight, they were hungry because they couldn't get the sugar water out of the can. So my bees were hungry. That's why they were very excited when I spritzed sugar water on them.